You'll be right to.
Hello, how are you? So my contacts wouldn't make my eyes take a little of the
You come here, you got to be prepared for 4 to 6 hours.
Exactly. That's what I was doing. I'm not going that far.
I'm not going that far either. I actually have a midnight course. I turn into a pumpkin and I'm not sure.
Turn into something.
Something nobody wants to say.
Right there by the white
Okay.
What about what?
tags. The others are interesting too.
It's terrible. It is, but I said, in my hand.
I don't want to task. I'm gonna learn something tonight. You know, they say.
You'll never figure out.
Yeah. Tough sale.
I'm not the big box. Eat it all at once. But you know, they're a little fast, right? So they're good for us.
I got everything. Good evening. It is 6:01. We are going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. Computer's moving slow here. Dr. Means, if you would conduct our roll call.
Mr. Davis. Here. Dr. Berry.
Here.
Dr. Guyton.
Here.
Ms. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Gant.
Here.
Mr. Worthy.
Here.
Dr. Yeager.
Here.
Dr. Knotts. Here. Dr. Maddox.
Here.
Thank you. We'll move on to amending and or adopting the agenda. I think many of us have had an opportunity to look over it as well as the accompanying documents. I'm going to read the document.
I've got a question before we do.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that in terms of 7.6, at one time we had talked about maybe taking a vote today because of the timeliness of it. Is that necessary?
Mr. Davis, a work session is always an opportunity for us to have a discussion. And so while this agenda item is on the agenda for purposes of moving forward, I would like to, or would appreciate the opportunity just to have one last discussion as a team here.
And I understand that. I'm just concerned about deadlines and all that kind of thing. Are we still, if we were?
So if the board decided to move forward with this cancellation, you would still be within the time frame to cancel it next week, and you can vote next week and still will be in the time frame. It's due October 16th, so we would still have time.
Because at one time Mike gave us a long period of time, so I didn't know that was still accurate. Okay. That's it.
Any other thoughts about the agenda?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, all right, and then all in favor? Okay, moving on to our informational items, the first of which is our report from Early Head Start. That is there, has been there for our review.
I think the highlight, if I may, Madam President, if you notice in those minutes, Dr. Anna Morgan, who's our lead school psychologist, met with that governing body to discuss the importance of early childhood education and the potential identification of children with special needs. And so I think it just underscores an ongoing message that we've tried to convey in the school district, that early childhood education is really critical to student success on all ends of the academic spectrum.
Any other?
I have one observation, and it's just an observation, and I don't want to ramble. Is Karen here?
Karen is here.
Yes, thank you. As I was reading the minutes again, I saw your list of parents that were newly elected, and it just dawned on me that you create so much capacity for us in terms of leadership in our community, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Okay. Fiscal's monthly report.
I've got just a question. I noticed that on the budget projections at August 31st, 2019, this is a list where, you know, and I do appreciate this being done, where you have the original budget, projected budget, expenditure, and so on. I'm trying to figure out, is this, when we pass SPLOS, does this original budget go back to the implementation of SPLOS 5 after we passed it? Or is it something that is constantly updated or over a period of time?
It's always been consistent. I mean, over time, my understanding of the process is that it's a moving target. And so I believe we provided the ballots of SPLOS 1 through 5, and those ballots are very general. And so the projects, they tend to move. So for example, I think it was in SPLOS 4, it talked about School C. School C hasn't been constructed yet. So it's really difficult to say, here's the budget and here's what the ballot said, because we don't construct we don't construct those ballots in that fashion. I have been in school districts where you have to pass bonds, and I am familiar with having to construct the budget, the construction budget, based on what your ballot said. But the way that the SPLOS budget, or ballot I should say, excuse me, too many B's, the way that the SPLOS ballot is constructed, that's a moving target based on administrative recommendations and what administration deems to be the priority based on that ballot.
I guess I wasn't very clear, so I apologize for that. I noticed that, I thought originally that Clarke Middle School was listed as a project when the first time I saw this list. But, you know, I don't see it here, and I'm assuming that it's because over a period of time when it seemed like that the priorities of the district were shifting, that got dropped from the column.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's just clarification. Okay.
If I can attempt to clarify some more. So to the original point, for example, Greg, Clarke Central Athletics and Cedar Shoals Athletics are on the SPLOS 5 budget projections at August 31. Is that the page you're looking at?
Yes, yes.
So that's a relatively recent addition, and that wasn't specifically said, but that's okay. Right? So it is. The answer is it is evolving. With regard to your mention about Clarke Middle, unless my eyes are deceiving, it's listed in projects not yet commenced on that same.
Oh, you're right.
It's just right there.
You're right. I apologize.
Okay.
I apologize.
Just
I missed
clarifying.
it. I missed it. Thank you. No further.
Any others? Okay,
I have one question. We don't have any construction going on right now, right?
No, we still have construction happening with the Cedar Shoals Athletic Facility. That's
Just
something.
that, those are the two, okay. just had to
I think
check.
there's been a heavy push of construction projects recently, and so nothing to the degree that we've had over the past few years this fall.
Just wearing my vice chair of finance hat. Just to point out to everybody, the SPOS 5 receipts have been very constant. The blue line on page 7, SPOS 5 receipts, you can see how consistent that's been over, the last year, roughly. So, and that is above the red line, which is the assumed monthly receipts moving into this. So we are continuing to do well there.
So what is the blue line, sorry, what is the blue line an average of?
It's the average of the receipts.
Average of
There's a 12-month average and a 24-month average.
Yeah, is the blue line a 12?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the average today. So we're averaging
Oh.
over 2 million. You know, our 24-month average is over 2 million per month.
Good question. So the next page actually has the numbers.
any other questions or observations? Okay, our Athens Community Career Academy report.
I think the Career Academy will come up later in our discussion around the potential cancellation of the purchase of 394 millage. I promise you, we did not plan the event this evening with the Career Academy to emphasize the sharing of facilities. But their board is continuing to do very good work. It's a strong governance board, and in fact, this past Friday, they received training from state officials on what they need to do to continue to promote the growth of the Career Academy.
I also want to say that I'm very pleased with the apprenticeships. I didn't have the number there, I don't think, but the retention is very high. So I'm very impressed with that.
And just a side note, this is just a reminder. We'll get some more information out, but we'll have our first of 2 board-on-board discussions with the Career Academy board on November 7th. And that's typically before these meetings begin.
And I think we, Anderson may have sent something out that the board.
Correct.
We've talked about.
But Ms. Palmer and I will make sure that it's on your calendars
Okay.
and you're aware.
Any other observations or thoughts about the information in the reports? Okay. All right, and our parent advisory board.
I've got a comment. You know,
I was just gonna say, I found this very concerning. I don't understand what's going on with the parent advisory board. I know you mentioned the other, Dr. Means mentioned last month when we were here that, and I was excited about the idea of a local school governance parent group. Did not realize at the time that that meant we were gonna do away with the parent advisory board. Is that really what you had on in mind?
I don't have the authority to eliminate or do away with any
Right, yeah.
organization. What I stated is that I have time constraints and capacity constraints of making sure where do we invest our time and energy. And so we are investing in our local school governance team board advisory group, and we're investing in our PTO, PTA, parent advisory group. I have to try to manage my time in terms of what organizations we are affiliating with and working with moving forward. I'm sure the parent advisory board will always stay in place. I think the question that was outlined in the minutes was, so what's the relationship and how often will the superintendent be able to attend? I'm still considering my calendar and how often I can be there.
can we create another mechanism for them to provide advice without your having to be present?
I think one thing that I would just caution all of us to think about is the affiliation of the Parent Advisory Board compared to our PTAs and PTOs and our local school governance teams. Those are organizations that have representatives at each school, or almost at each school, and they have a mechanism to report back at each school. So a local school governance team has a team of people to go back to and report to. A PTA or a PTO has a group of people to go back to. The Parent Advisory Board doesn't have a local affiliate that they go back to. So it's a group of individuals in the community who are parents who said, we are going to gather in the name of what is of interest to us based on our bylaws that we created. In essence, the local school governance teams and the PTO and PTAs, they either have a national or state affiliation of some type of other organization where PAB does not. I don't want to devalue the Parent Advisory Board. It's a valuable group, and we will find some way. I still need to consider what that way is. We'll find some way to continue to collaborate, but we have to also keep in mind that I don't know if we can meet with that group every month and then have our meetings with the local school governance teams and then have our meetings with our PTAs and PTOs. That's asking a lot.
Dr. Berry and Dr. Maddox.
Yeah, so for the LSGT parent group, just curious about how that will be constituted, what progress has been made along those lines, and I at least the last time that I asked, or last time we talked about, there were a couple of schools who did not have LSGT in place.
No, it would be the opposite is the PTOs and PTAs. Everyone has an LSGT. They may not have a full roster on their local school governance team, but every school has a local school governance team. It may not be as robust and as others, but we do have challenges with PTAs and PTOs where every school doesn't have either a PTA or PTO.
I guess I misunderstood that. I thought that maybe earlier this year, at least a couple of schools, maybe Road, I don't want to, but I'm not remembering correctly, was having a very difficult time recruiting LSGT members, and that potentially there was not an LSGT in that school. That's not correct.
Alp has it. I know people are very actively gone through 96 principal searches.
So every school has an LSGT board that includes community members, parents. Every
Staff.
school does.
That's
Okay.
by design, that's a part of your charter.
I know, but I swear I remember earlier this year that we had some concerns about at least two schools that it was not fully developed to the level that we would hope for it to be developed. So the LSG parent group that's noted in these minutes would be comprised of parents from each of the schools
Yes.
of the LSGT groups that already exist.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so where are we in the process of creating those parent
The
groups?
invitation has gone out this week.
Okay. And the intention is not to replace the PAB. It's just like you said,
The intention
time
is to create a authentic two-way communication loop between the district and schools, because the parent-teacher association or PTOs have organizations at each school, or almost every school, and the local school governance teams are at every school. Those are organizations that are in place, and they have a responsibility to communicate to their school community. So if let's take ALPS. There's an LSGT I don't know if Alps is one of the schools without a PTA. Let's just assume they do have a PTA. Those are two parent organizations that have parents who are based in that school community that go to PTA meetings, that go to local school governance team meetings. And we can't forget, the part of the charter says that a local school governance team has a responsibility to communicate to the rest of the parents in that school community. So this is not to replace the parent advisory board, but what we've done administratively is we looked at our communication mechanisms and said, we're not leveraging the organizations that are already in place and are already officially affiliated with the school system. We're simply engaging with the parent advisory board that doesn't have a group to go back to. So for example, if you are the parent advisory board representative for Cedar Shoals, there isn't any organization that you go back to at Cedar Shoals to say, I'm the rep, I'm now reporting back to the parent advisory board for Cedar Shoals. They don't have a parent advisory board at Cedar Shoals. So we've created this district-wide organization for the purpose of engaging the district. And we are simply attempting to communicate more effectively with each of our school communities through working with organizations that are already in place, either the LSGT or the PTA/PTO. The last thing I would say is that from an equity standpoint, the state association of the PTA would say that a school district has a responsibility to engage the schools that don't have a PTA or don't have a PTO. And it's not enough to say, well, 18 of our 21 schools have a PTA, so those 3 schools, you're out of luck. The state organization works with school districts to say, how can you promote the PTA work at those schools that are not in existence, to make sure that there's a level playing field if we attempt to make this work happen at those schools. And that's another reason for us to connect with our PTAs and PTOs. I think what I would just encourage you to think about is this has nothing to do with the parent advisory board. This has more to do with where are we investing our time with parent organizations that are already in existence that we're not attending to. So we can make it about the parent advisory board. That's not appropriate. Candidly, we should have minutes from our PTA council at the board level. We should be receiving minutes from the LSGT parent advisory board. That's what we're striving for. This is not about what the parent advisory board isn't going to have. It's really more about us trying to expand our services.
Looking at the list of people who will participate, I happen to know a lot of these people. It's very diverse, and as a grassroots person, I do see the value in having this group. Because I know with our LGST, our local governance team, we've been talking about making sure that they are more diverse, a little more like the student body. And this is a very good representation of diversity, looking at the names on this list. And I know that we voted to hire the community engagement person. So is it possible that maybe that would be a role where they could engage with this group?
Again, I want to focus on what we're trying to do, not about what the parent advisory board isn't going to have. So if our job is to diversify, and I pointed this out to the board during your training this winter and spring around our LSGTs and the demographic makeup of the LSGTs. We asked for that demographic data, and I provided that to you to show you it's not representative. But instead of us working around, doing a workaround and saying, so here's another group that's diverse, I would rather us invest our energy in making the affiliate organization that we are responsible for working with more diverse. I would rather invest our time in making the local school governance teams more diverse. I don't want to do a workaround and say, and hang our hats on, but the parent advisory board is diverse. Again, we're gonna continue to work with the group. We have to figure out how. We have to also figure it out within the context of, we're adding 2 other groups that we need to bring and lift off the ground. And so we're still trying to figure that out.
Can I just offer a kind of a friendly suggestion for what, I mean, because I hate to, like Tawana was saying, when we've got something there, I don't know, it seems like we don't know where these people came from. You know, and it seems like the first question would be.
They say that schools totally different to our names.
Right.
No, but like where the organization.
Yeah, in other words, some of them, from what I've read, is that it started out where PTOs, and because I'm trying to think, it seems like mostly we have here is PTOs in this county. At least it did years ago.
Some PTAs.
Yeah, some PTAs. So it started out as that these were selected by the local school PTAs. Okay. Then it says in the minutes, and again, I'm just going on the basis of what they said. Then it became sometimes that was done, and sometimes it wasn't done. Sometimes the principal appointed. You know? Right. And so, what I would suggest before we go further is let's find out who of those people were actually appointed or elected by an organization at their respective schools. I mean, and that would give us some type of breadth in terms of, you know, are these people self-appointed, or are they do come from a body?
I just met with some representatives from the Parent Advisory Board this afternoon. They shared with me that they typically send a message out to the principal, and then the principal goes out within their parent community and selects someone to serve on the Parent Advisory Board. Again, I don't think we are very happy to continue to find a way to work with the Parent Advisory Board, but that is contrary to what an authentic grassroots parent organization should be. If there's a Parent Advisory Board or a PTA that has a group of parents that meet monthly to talk about uplifting their school, I want to have the ability to pull a representative from that group, get their feedback, listen to them, have them in the room with their other colleagues, and then they can take the information from that dialogue and take it back to their local school PTA. That's authentic two-way communication. That's not happening with the Parent Advisory Board. The Parent Advisory Board has value. They have done good work. This is not about what they're not going to receive. I would hope that we can focus on, but what are we trying to do? And how are we increasing communication? And by us having outreach and saying we want to have a parent local school governance team advisory, and we want a PTA advisory group, that's actually expanding communication, not decreasing it.
Okay, is there a group right now, a PTO, PTA group in place that you meet with periodically?
No, sir, not right now.
So there is nothing out there?
Not right now. That's what we're trying to create. And so I'll go back to my original point that I shared last month. And so the capacity, the bandwidth that we have as an administrative team, we have to figure out how can we continue to support the Parent Advisory Board, the new PTA, PTO Parent Advisory Board, and the LSGT Parent Advisory Board. Again, the message here should be that we're communicating more, not less.
Dr. Knox, and then
Sorry to continue the theme, but there might be some policy implications for this. In policy LEBA-R1, the Parent Advisory Board is actually stated, it says the Clarke County School District will utilize the existing district-wide PAB to provide advice on general matters related to family engagement and equity for the SIF, or School Improvement Framework. And so maybe that would continue, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would be a different group that would be more representative. Is that right?
Correct. I think it also speaks to a conversation we had in our policy agenda meeting today, which indicates because I think you referenced a regulation.
I did.
And so hopefully at some point at the policy committee level, we'll talk about the role of the board in developing policy and not regulations. That's another prime example. Regulations typically in a school system is something that administration constructs and is not considered a policy.
But
Right now it is. And so I think that's another prime example of where that's a challenge for us administratively.
Right, and as we discussed, maybe what happens is that the policy gets stronger, because that was our discussion this morning in our agenda setting, that then maybe that means that LEPA would be expanded or revised or whatever. I just thought it would be.
Sure.
I thought it's relevant, since
Absolutely.
they are actually stated there explicitly.
I was just gonna ask, ordinarily in districts, do the PTOs or PTAs from each individual school ever send a representative to a district-wide PTO type gathering?
In my 22 years of administration, that's all I'm used to.
That's what you are?
That's the model that I'm familiar with the most.
So, can we informally encourage the PAB members to get involved in their PTOs? And then maybe they become the representatives that meet, officially the PTO, so
Sure.
we don't dismantle a group that's clearly working together well and communicating with each other well.
And again, this is not to dismantle the parent advisory. I think the messaging is it depends on how you want to look at a situation. We're not suggesting that the parent advisory board is going to be dismantled. It's just that they now will have to share the space of being I like to call it a parent focus group with our area, I'm used to calling it an area council of PTA representatives or a local school governance team advisory board. It's just that they're not the sole parent group anymore. We're trying to bring others to the table.
So can I say more? One of the concerns was what happens when the charter ends
Yes.
and we no longer have the LSGT boards, which is hard for me to think about, but I guess that is going to happen, right? So
No, I hope not.
No, there's
It's not gonna
a
happen.
note of explanation.
Oh, okay, sorry. So it's not going to happen anytime
I hope not.
They had said in the minutes that they had misinterpreted it, and it said that we could only be a charter system for a maximum of 10 years, but that's incorrect.
So that's
So there's a new
okay.
government.
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't get that far. Okay, so that's not, thank you.
But Dr. Yeager, I would just also point out, not to rebut the minutes from that organization, but from a policy perspective, we changed policy to identify local school governance teams. In the past, we had something called school councils, right, Mr. Worthy?
Yes.
And so if they're not local school governance teams, then we would have school councils. So there will always, in my lens, if you will, there will always be an LSGT advisory board of parents. There will always be, there should always be some type of mechanism for PTA or PTO representatives. And there's space at the table for the parent advisory board. I think the reaction from the parent advisory board is one perspective. I hope now you are hearing the other perspective. We'll find a way to continue to engage them within the context of also expanding our infrastructure and working with other parent groups.
So my question was, does any board member receive minutes from the parent advisory board? Are we actually getting those?
I sort of felt like the parent advisory board was really the primary way of communication between the district, and the school, whereas PTO, although we didn't have one, focused a little bit more on the school. So it seems like there can be some benefit to somehow, in a magical world, we could combine these groups. But I guess I have a question with the LSGT meetings and the LSGT advisory board that you referenced. Are those meetings going to be open to the public as well?
Yes.
Okay. So theoretically, they could be something that people from Parent Advisory Board participate in as well.
I would just
Or
ask.
attend,
I
not
would,
necessarily.
sure, I would just ask the board and the community to imagine this. Right now, if there's a representative from each local school governance team coming to a parent advisory meeting of LSGT members, that representative has someone or a body to go back to and report. If there's a representative from each PTA and PTO, that representative has someone to go back to. That is not the case with the Parent Advisory Board. That's not the case. And in fact, every school doesn't have a representative. And so from a structure standpoint, from a communication standpoint, that's a concern. That's a concern. And that's why we believe we have to do our job in expanding communication, not to limit it, but it does mean that the table is getting a little more crowded now. There are 2 more participants at the table of parent advisory communication. This is not an issue of something being taken away. It's actually expanding communication.
I guess I'm still feeling a little bit confused about what, as you speak about two-way communication, so how will they communicate? How do you see this? Or if you say that you're not dismantling this board, how do you find them? How do you think they're going to communicate?
The local school governance team parent advisory?
Yes.
They're going to go.
The PAB. The PAB. I'm still trying to figure out where their place is at the table. I'm still confused. Well, even though you explained that, I'm still a little bit confused.
I think that's the challenge of the parent advisory board, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I would think if I was on this board, I would be confused as to what our next steps would be. So I guess I would look to you, if they've been meeting with you, right? And you're saying that from what I'm hearing, I would not be able to meet with you all because I'm quite busy with the other groups. Where would they have the opportunity, and who would they have the opportunity to speak with?
So let's think about it. Let's step back for a second.
Okay.
And let's think about it from this perspective. The purpose of a parent-teacher organization or a parent-teacher association is to support the school, isn't it? Right? That's the purpose.
I'm just asking for
No, so I'm just asking the question, right?
Okay.
That's the purpose of a PTA, correct?
And that's what,
Right? The purpose of a local school governance team is to support the work of the LSGT at a school, right? So what's the purpose of the parent advisory board?
Well, according to policy, it's been to provide some type of guidance or information as it relates to, or perspective, I would imagine, from schools to the district.
I mean, it's right here.
In absence of those other groups. So in absence of a district organization of PTA representatives, in absence of a local school governance team parent advisory group, in absence of those groups, yes, the parent advisory board did serve in that role. If you have those 2 other groups that I've aforementioned groups that I just mentioned, then I'm not saying that the parent advisory board goes away. But now you have other organizations whose sole purpose is to support schools, not to come to a meeting to discuss district work. Typically, a parent group is put together to focus on supporting the school that children of those parents attend. Parent advisory board is just a little different.
Dr. Knoxon.
Yes, just for clarity, on our Clarke County School District webpage, it says, the Parent Advisory Board, PAB, promotes the discussion and development of a shared vision of the educational needs of all students in the Clarke County School District. PAB provides a forum for parents to share their opinions and ideas with each other, the school district administration, and the Clarke County Board of Education. So that's kind of their mission statement, I guess.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, Ms. Davis, and then I think we'll move
Yes,
this
yeah, because this is
conversation
like a long
along.
time. I was gonna say, I didn't know we were gonna actually pick this apart tonight. I thought we just being brought up to date on where they were. I really appreciate the details in the report this time, because actually I saw that, maybe I didn't see it last time. But when I read that, I was left with that same feeling that I had when we started talking about what is our role versus the LSGTs. And so it brought that conversation back full force. So as we implemented becoming a charter system, we really haven't flushed that through all of the different groups that we interact with. And so this, to me, feels like another one of those action items that we need to put on somebody's calendar somewhere and flush it out so that we'll know, and we can look at our policies and make sure that we're in alignment with what our charter says that we are doing. And I saw it also as a great opportunity to even look at how it threads into that whole feedback loop that we've talked about several times about how we get feedback from the community on how we do it. Yeah, so I see a lot of opportunity here, but I don't think we can do that tonight. So this is really
Looking
good.
at the minutes, I believe that parents are concerned tonight, people in this, so that's why I brought it up.
I thought I really, well, I don't think that, because I'm
So I don't think we should be censoring each other, is what I'm saying.
I'm totally not. I'm so, that's what I'm shutting down right now.
Can I volunteer to maybe meet with you or arrange a group of people that are interested in trying to work this out and communicate with these parents?
What are we working out?
I think they feel like they've been shut out. And these are parents who've been working hard on behalf of the children, and they feel shut out. And I don't think they understand maybe exactly what your vision is or why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure.
And maybe we can talk to them about that and maybe help them find ways within the structure you're promoting. It's just communication and reaching out to help them see where their roles might shift. If you want them to be reporting to something, then that's what they need, how they need to redress it. I don't think we should be in the business of shutting down or closing out something that seems to be important to parents in our school district. I understand what you're saying. I see that you want to do these other things, and I totally agree with those other things. So we just want to make sure we're communicating well to the parents on this board so that they can see their role going forward, so they don't feel shut out. Because I think that's what I'm reading in here, is that they feel shut out.
I think sometimes when you read the minutes, that's a perspective that is provided. And so you're responding to a perspective. Yes.
I received many emails from many of these
A
parents. Perspectives of how
Yes.
they feel about, and you're not going to be allowed to tell them how they feel because they feel this way.
Oh, Dr. Yeager, I would never do that. And so, not intending to do that at all. Yes.
Let me give a bit of a history here. It used to be a tab. Of course, we still supposed to have a tab. Tab was a teacher advisory board and the parent advisory board. And it's somewhat true what you're saying, Dr. Yeager. I think what happened there with tab when school council came along, and then of course they sort of disappeared, sort of felt shut out. And I think that's what you're saying now. But when you get so many groups that want to be heard and you're not being heard, then you got to figure out a way, as Ms. Davis said a few minutes ago, and I think Dr. Means is saying the same thing, to make it happen. Okay? But I do know that that was a teacher advisory board. Ernie Hardaway used to meet with them on a monthly basis, the same as with PAB. And all of a sudden it just fizzled out because of what I just said.
Right. Dr. Berry.
This group is not fizzling out. It looks to me. So I'm just looking at the folks who were in attendance at their September 9th meeting, and there's 32 people there.
Well, like Dr. Yeager said, they feel shut out.
But they're not fizzling out.
No.
I think that they
No,
are.
I said that about
Okay.
tab, not PAB now. Okay?
Sure.
Don't misunderstand me now.
I know, and, but if you do look at the number of people who were in attendance at one meeting, there's 28 people on the list who were in attendance, 2 were not there. This seems like an active group. I'm not an historian, but I work in the history field, and this has been an organization that's been active since 2006. So my concern is just, this is an active group, they've been around for a while, it's concerning to me. I think I'm aligning with Dr. Yeager about how can we continue to take this very active board into account with the work that they're doing and the time and energy that they are obviously spending on their interest in our school district. That's where I'm at.
So this has been a very healthy conversation. I think it outlines that the board is very interested in finding out the how the administration is going to engage with a parent group. And so the real question would be, from a governance standpoint, is should that be the role of the board to discuss how administration is going to engage with a parent advisory group? And so that in itself speaks to some of the challenges.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we've all noted that over the past couple of months, we have different definitions that we're working through as it relates to governance. And as it relates to our particular role. And so I don't think any of us would disagree with that.
Can I say one? I also think that, given that, I also think that our role is to try to make sure that to bring information that we receive and make sure that there aren't unintended consequences to things that you have, what you're planning to do, which is fine and good, but I think what Tish was saying is that there are some unintended consequences that maybe you didn't realize, and we have been getting emails from people who are saying that this is how they feel and this is the way that they are perceiving it, which may not be the way you intended at all, but that's the way they're perceiving it. And I think it's helpful for us to come and say that, because otherwise you wouldn't know, and then you wouldn't be able to respond to it.
So I appreciate that statement. Dr. Deitman, we met earlier this week and you shared that concern. You're the only board member who shared that concern. So I don't know how long we've had this conversation now, but if there were other board members who shared that concern, this is the first time I'm hearing it from others, which then from a governance perspective, again, is a surprise from many others on the board. If it was a concern, then calling, providing an email to say, Dr. Means, here's a perspective I have based on emails that I received. Have you thought about this as an unintended consequence? But for us to have this discussion in this format, again, I think just highlights a governance challenge that is present.
And I think it
clear and
highlights
present right
that.
now.
I think it also highlights that we are in an unusual place right now, and to not acknowledge that there's some discomfort in people trying to navigate, right? How do I express my questions to you or to the board? When do I express my questions and still stay within the parameters of governance? I think we have to acknowledge that even if it is a surprise, hearing from other people about their concerns, that sometimes people don't know exactly how to go about expressing these concerns directly to you or directly to the board without feeling that they may be outside of their roles. And so I think a large part of this conversation, I think we'll all agree that it perhaps is indicative of where we are, trying to figure out the spaces that we can actually ask questions that inform us so that we can make decisions as it relates to voting.
the budget policy and those things.
And I would just say, well, first of all, I've been out of town all week. I met with you on Friday. I asked you a question directly about how should I communicate when I get emails from parents? What do I do with these concerns that I get emails from parents? And if I may say, you didn't actually tell me the best way you would prefer for me to do it. I don't believe. So, I mean, I don't actually know what I'm supposed to do at all with all of this public opinion, which I seem to be attracting. And I've been criticized, and I don't think that's fair because I'm trying to figure out how I'm supposed to communicate all of this information that I get every day in the emails. And I can tell you how many emails I get a day.
Sure.
And so if
I would respectfully disagree with that, how you characterize the meeting. And in fact, Ms. Davis was in the room when you posed the question, and I provided an answer. You may not have liked the answer, but you were given an answer. Dr. Gant, I would agree with you that I think this is indicative of the situation that we're in, but I would just respectfully cite that board members have found ways to present their questions in other forums, either through emails to the entire board and our legal counsel, through other means. People are asking questions despite their our unique situation. And then the other thing that I would just point out for the community's sake is that I've asked Ms. Palmer because I've tried to take the high road with our situation and have asked for one-on-one meetings if people want clarification around issues. Some board members have refused to meet with me. And so I think as we walk through and deal with this unique situation that we're all in, I just want to maybe borrow a phrase that you've used, Dr. Gant, which is we all need to look at our contributions to the situation.
If I may, can we close this one out and
Yes,
move the agenda?
because I don't think we're going to solve board dynamics
Yes.
on agenda at a work session.
And I still live by the thing on the back of our cards.
I don't have any of those cards.
We still haven't got.
You gonna get one? We'll make sure.
Okay.
I don't have cards. I've been here for 7 months and I don't have a business card. So.
That's mine, but that's, I literally use that every time I get a deal. Most of it I remember by now, but, yeah, it's a hierarchy. And we talked about that hierarchy, how we just get things to, it's just easier for me to pass mine to the others get things.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on with this, with our agenda for the evening. We are at item 4, financial reports.
Madam President, board members, the reports have been provided from June. It indicates that we've actually continued to increase our fund balance by $800,000, and we ended in the positive. Again, this is on the heels of having a balanced budget coming to this board at the beginning of the school year, something that we've done for 2 straight years. So when we add fund balance, on the front or on the back end of having a balanced budget, that's actually a positive, a very good positive for our school system.
I have a question out of ignorance and forgetting things. So we got the financials for June. So when do we get financials for this fiscal, starting with this fiscal year? What's the timing on that?
It's going to be this month's finance committee.
Okay, and we'll have
3 months worth.
Okay, so boom. Okay,
Yep.
good. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
I have a question, and I do appreciate the spreadsheet on the professional legal services for the year 2019. But I see that they're all with Hall, Booth, and Smith. My understanding, and this is a time to clear the air, so to speak,
I guess so,
is that there is another law firm that the district has employed. And so wouldn't that be listed under professional legal services for year 2019 or not?
I'll look into that.
We'll look into it. Okay.
Ms. Davis?
This is a simple question, and it's because, for whatever reason, I didn't do well in accounting.
Okay.
So, I passed with a B, so hell out of help. I'm seeing a negative number of like $39,000 left in our budget for legal services for 2019-13. And we are in month 4 of the fiscal year.
No, this is
No,
last
Currently,
year.
we just started
Last
period.
year?
We just started period. So the financial reports covered through June 30th of 2019. So
Right.
Mr. Knox just mentioned when are we going to get the financial reports for the past 3 months?
Okay.
And that will come at next finance committee meeting.
So it looks like we underspent by $39,000.
Over.
Over.
It was over.
It was
I
over.
want to make sure that, so the parentheses in this case is over.
It's a negative.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are we doing now? Never mind, don't answer, I'll wait. I think my computer's charged.
Okay. Any?
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that they always tell you is that if you ask for something, try to figure out when you're gonna be able to get it. In terms of any other legal expenses, could we have that in next month's report?
Yes, sir.
That's great.
So that's an action item for us to do.
Any other questions or any board? Item 5, I just have a few things that I wanted to mention. One is that we, Dr. Means, myself, and Ms. Davis shared with you all that for this school year, we have some dates, some tentative dates that we plan on meeting to confirm the agenda, discuss agenda items. We are in the process of redoing those dates based on my schedule, my teaching schedule, and so hopefully we'll be able to get those dates out to you soon. Originally, based on what you had sent, Dr. Means, I think it was on Tuesdays or something like that, the Tuesday before, a few weeks before.
What days are you referring to?
Referring to, so at our retreat, we
Okay.
mentioned that at least, so once a month, the 3 of us get together to discuss the agenda for that following month. And so there has been like a calendar, and I think it was sent to all of us, and it was inside of a sort of board governance document.
I think so.
It was on one of the pages, and we were encouraged to look at it, particularly if there were any like areas or topics, for instance, that we could predict that would be important for us so that we could go into the school year with a little bit more intention. And so I was just saying that those dates are not as they appear in that governance document, that we'll be changing some of those dates, but to encourage you to still take a look at it and be on the lookout for some modified dates. Also, as it relates to the dates of our training for GSBA and the restorative work, just want to let you know we don't have those dates yet, but we have heard back from the Conflict Center as well as the Georgia School Boards Association. Dr. Means reached back out to them, and so soon hopefully we will have a plan of what trainings will look like and that they will match the needs that we've identified and that have shown up, that tend to show up at many of our meetings. Lastly, I won't share too much. I will say that a couple of months ago, I think I sent an email to the board after Linda, Ms. Davis, and I met with PSC on the board's behalf with the questions that we had. I shared those answers and also suggested that we may want to think about when we wanted that back on the agenda. It was originally on the agenda to take action, and at the time we took action to follow up with PSC. And so that is still lingering. I did hear literally today from PSC, and so at some point we will need to decide when that will appear back on our agenda. But I just wanted to let you know you'll receive a little more communication about that. Any questions?
Sort of.
Okay.
And Greg and Dr. Means can maybe help me here. We had, since there's nothing specific to policy on here, I just want to piggyback off of what you said. When I say here, I mean not the entire agenda. With regard to meeting with GSBA, so if I heard everybody correctly this morning, that what we were talking about was a review of all B policies, or most B policies, to be part of that.
I wasn't here this one. Can you tell me what?
Well, we were doing an agenda setting meeting for the policy committee.
Okay.
And so Greg and I met with Dr. Myers and Dr. Means. And so I was told to relay something, and it would be better if it did it tonight. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to find a place to do it, and I think this is it.
Okay.
Also norms, we want to do that side by side.
Okay. So what Greg said. So B policies including BHAA, or the norms thing, basically. Because there were several B policies that were coming up in discussion with regard to the agenda setting. And so that's what I'm supposed to be telling you.
So are you saying that that's going to be a part of the GSBA work?
That was what I'm.
My understanding, Madam President, was that there was 3 components of the GSBA work. One would be to have the 2 facilitators look at our governance policies one more time and allow the entire board to go through that process. The second would be to allow them to complete their review of the governance standards that they had to rush through on that Friday evening. And then the third would be to provide examples of board norms that other districts around Georgia have created, but also assist in developing board norms for the Clarke County school system.
I see, and so those are, what I hear you saying is that that's separate than the B policy review.
I think it's part of the package that
Okay.
GSBA will be providing to, or that we're looking for them to support us in.
Okay. And so at the end of that work, the objectives or the sort of tangibles, we would have revised B policies?
I think so, yes.
And norms.
Yes, and a stronger understanding of governance standards, effective governance standards as articulated by the state of Georgia.
Which would be the BH policy, the code of ethics for board members. That's what they didn't finish.
No, I think that there are actual, I think there are a total of 8 standards, Mr. Worthy,
Oh, okay. I'm with you.
around effective governance for school systems.
I'm with you.
Yes, sir.
I think we only got through, I think we.
They rushed.
Yeah.
I think they tried to do as many as they could.
Okay.
Dr. Knox, did I capture what it was you were sharing?
I think so.
Okay. And
Yes.
Yeah,
Is that-
and I think in
that's
terms of timeliness, Dr. Means certainly feels a need that at least a couple of the board policies need to be done fairly quickly, and in terms of the B policies. And that's why having this as soon as possible within people's schedule would be helpful, so that the policy committee can have clarity in terms of, make sure, we don't want to be in a situation where we develop something as a policy committee and then it comes back to the whole board and they say, what have you done? We're going to send it back to you, and then we end up like we did with our previous norms. They didn't capture what all board members wanted to capture. So as much guidance as the policy committee has from the entire board and the superintendent dealing with the norms, that would be very helpful.
well, and most of that will be a result of our meeting, our ongoing development with the Georgia School
Yeah.
Board Association.
Yeah, I think
I think
so.
that's what I'm hearing.
I think so.
Okay, any other that was all that I had to share. Are there any questions about?
I would just urge us to move forward quickly on the PSC. Good,
Thank you for maybe this is the right time to address that there's still the unanswered concern that we have that we talked about in the executive session. We should stay there until now, but at some point we need to address that piece as well, and that is that complaint that we have. And so I guess the question I would have about that is, are we at a place where we're clearing our table of those things that are hanging out there? We've got the PSC, we've got the advanced ed. Where are we? Yeah.
I think, so at some point, we will have to talk about when we want to put the PSC complaint back on the table, back on the agenda. From my understanding of speaking with Mr. Shaw, there was not like a 30-day turnaround or 60-day, such as with the advanced ed. Nevertheless, I'm sure it makes a lot of sense to try to resolve these as efficiently as possible. So that is a decision of the board when we put that particular action item back on the agenda to take action regarding the PSC complaint. Mr. Shaw did say today, and it was a very, very brief conversation actually, that he sort of reiterated what was in the letter. You know, the board needs to follow up and, yeah, say yay or nay, but it's hanging out there. And his advice was to let him know when we plan on resolving this or taking action, regardless of what the action is. And of course, as it relates to the advanced ed, I think you inquired about two things. I'm not aware of the timeline at this time. I do know that there was I think the 30-day window for the district to reply. But as far as like the timeline and the resolution of that, we don't have an idea. What's within our scope of courses, what we voted on last week was to move forward with council. And I want to say that was within a 14-day window. Did we keep that as a part of the motion? And so we are.
But then also to create to start.
To begin working on. So those are sort of the things. It doesn't answer when they'll be resolved, but I mean, as it relates to the PSC complaint, which I feel may be more within our, I guess, control, if you would. I don't know what advanced ed timeline is. We need to decide, is it something that goes on the agenda now, next week, a call meeting, that would be up to us.
This is turned into open mic, right? At the board meeting.
Well,
so not open, but well, it's all right. So I'm going to try not to turn it into that. But again, we still have some other things that we need to do. Let me just kind of give you a heads up. The Superintendent's Evaluation Committee meets on the 14th. That's going to be at 1:45, and it is to plan how we evaluate the superintendent for the year end. With that being said, we still have the mid-year not closed because we haven't heard back from board members on the question that I asked and the question that you subsequently asked either. So again, that's still out there.
Can you, so one of the things I shared, I think you and I spoke about, what is prohibiting the evaluation? Well, okay, I don't want to get into
Yeah, it was the question that we got. The action item was to ask the attorney for an opinion. He gave the opinion.
That's right.
Haven't heard back from the board on that.
What are you expecting to hear back from the board?
whether you accept that opinion or if you reject that opinion. This is what got us in this place. If somebody else has a different opinion about that, let me know.
I don't think it's an opinion, it's a matter of following the law in terms of what the legal
Tried that
counsel
and it
said.
didn't work, so.
Yeah, he cleared that up.
I didn't see a whole lot of clarity in that response, but that
There we
was,
go.
What do you mean you didn't see any clarity?
It's okay, so we'll have that discussion
I
with
saw
our
it in there.
superintendent's evaluation committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's talk about that and then see if we can have a question put out to the.
Yeah, I do think, I think sharing this, the concern that all of us have is that we need to go ahead and resolve, close, have closure to that process as the board moves into
That would be
December.
amazing.
Ms. Davis, was that the only process you were speaking of that needs to be resolved?
No. It's the other unresolved complaint, so, and so we can have that discussion too at the same time. But that needs to be
You
answered.
said the 14th of October.
It is the 14th at 1:45. We'll be here somewhere.
The evaluation.
Maybe in the Heritage Room. I don't know who's gonna be here at 1:45. We gotta find a space.
can you lay that out, Linda, in terms of preparation for that 14th meeting? We're alluding to things that I'm not sure what we're alluding to, so if you could put it in your agenda.
Dr. Mathis reminded me that we needed to have a plan in place so that we don't miss the November 30th deadline
That's right.
for getting the feedback. So this was the superintendent's evaluation committee meeting to put together, with Dr. Means, to put together, we have to agree on what that evaluation is gonna be. That's what this meeting on the 14th is
So that's
about.
the instrument itself.
Not necessarily.
Okay, that's what I'm saying, if there's other stuff attached,
Yeah.
you don't have to tell me now, but, let me know ahead of time.
So, are you something else?
You mentioned that there was something else as it relates to not being resolved. I have the advanced ed, we still
We
need to
have
work on
two things at
evaluation.
advanced ed. We have one advanced ed complaint issued by a community member or someone from the community. We have an advanced ed
Right.
complaint issued by Dr. Means. It's not a complaint, but it was an inquiry. And so we have not acted on that inquiry, is the other thing that
Okay.
hasn't happened.
And so I assumed that once the formal complaint was made, that inquiry in many ways was like based on my reading with the exhibits. And so let me be clear. What is the specific request? Like you mentioned that there is something else. What is it that the board needs to do so that we can move forward and resolve this?
So our former president and I were notified that the board failed to take action on a complaint issued by our only employee. We have still not taken action on a complaint from our employee.
Although that was not a formal, and this is just based on my memory here, based on what I've read, that was not a formal complaint, but action
wasn't.
still needs to be taken.
Yes, that's it, correctly. That's what you said.
And from my recollection, I don't recall there being a specific request to take action. So when you say take action, you're just saying because it does fall within our policy to go to address
Take
these.
action, yes.
Okay.
It's a personnel issue.
Okay.
And we should probably take it to a personnel executive session.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
So, if I think we're talking about what I think we're talking about, our former board president was very specifically asked in an email what we needed to do about this, and we were told nothing.
I don't know who
So,
told you that.
it's in an email. In fact, I was just getting ready to pull it up. He
Give me
said
that,
nothing.
though. I have to do that.
Okay.
Because.
And that was
it
why
hasn't
I
gone
was
away.
confused when I saw that letter in the end of Dr. Means's response, the one that he had sent to you and to Jared, because I've never seen that before. That was the first that I had ever seen or heard that we were supposed to be doing something.
Correct. And so what I think I hear is that the unresolved issues at hand are the advanced ed, formal complaint, but then also the request to take some type of action on the board. The board to take some type of action regarding a separate complaint, the informal complaint, as well as the PSC and evaluation. Right now, those are sort of some outstanding things that I think it would be helpful if we all went back and reviewed policy as it relates to these, particularly as it relates to taking action on the informal complaint. So that, and looking at communication so that we are all brought up to speed on where we are. Because I think many of us share the same concerns, and that is when we ask specifically, what do we do with this information, and the response is nothing, then as a new board member, we do nothing. And so perhaps that's a lapse in policy or awareness of policy, but.
We're talking in code in a lot
Yeah.
of ways.
That disturbs me.
So,
Okay.
are you suggesting we not talk? Ms.
About
Davis?
this, because it needs to be an executive session if we're gonna
I
talk
agree.
about it.
I would have to defer to legal counsel on that ability to go into closed session.
But I don't
Decipher
think
the code, you gotta tell me what you wanna talk about. Tell me.
And so at a minimum, Madam President, at a minimum, what I would suggest is perhaps if you, Ms. Davis and I could meet and discuss these issues and clarify them offline, maybe that would help from a clarity standpoint.
I think that's fine, and I think majority of us at the table are clear. Well, we're not. But we know which situations we're referencing, let's just say that.
We know what we're clear on what we're doing.
Right, but I do, but yes.
See, I'm not. And so,
I'll meet you after this meeting.
Well, you asked the question, you asked Ms. Davis the question.
so here's the, I'll try to do it in code. There was an initial contact from me to Advanced Ed about a situation. Is that the situation we're referring to?
Yes.
And I believe the former board president made a statement of do nothing with this. Is that what you're referencing?
Yes.
Okay. So I think what Ms. Davis has now outlined is that still, even by, so I think that's a challenge for the board because you either have to do something, you have to either start that process again soon. Mr. Bybee said do nothing because it was, his understanding was it was going to Advanced Ed and that there's nothing for the board to engage around. But please note that I decided in the name of good faith not to take that issue to Advanced Ed. It's still, there was an additional letter that was sent to the then president and vice president saying at the local level you should do something about this, and that was never acted upon.
And that letter, I don't think was shared with.
And that's the challenge.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so,
Shared
we're like, wait, what were we,
Right,
what
right.
were we supposed to?
So I think
do?
what Ms. Davis is referencing is there's, at some point, the board will have to take up that communication. Is that what you're, that's what I meant by clear, I didn't have full clarity. That's what you're saying, correct?
You just made it very clear, thank you.
Thank you.
And do you mind sharing that communication with the board? I'm
Yeah, so we
assuming
know what
it's
the hell we're
something
talking about.
that we're supposed to
It's the last exhibit in Dr. Means' response.
Okay.
Oh,
that's-
okay, okay.
All right.
So that was when
So
I
that's how we got
realized
That is what it's, okay.
that we never, that there was
Got it late
something that we
today.
had not seen.
Yeah.
So we have 4 unresolved areas that, as I've shared with the board, that, well, I actually shared 2 that I thought should take priority, but these are definitely unresolved issues that we'll need to work to resolve.
It's just impossible for us to be accountable to something that we had absolutely no idea that we were accountable for. I would just like that on the record.
Yeah.
Our tax allocation district.
Well, I would like to welcome our partners from Athens, Clarke County Unified Government. Mr. Williams is here, who will go over the tax allocation district and its impact to the school system. Blaine, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Superintendent Means, and good evening, y'all. I'm Blaine Williams, I'm manager of the Unified Government, Athens, Clarke County. I want to come tonight to you to talk to you about this concept and would like your permission to return with some more specifics in the future. And I want to recognize Commissioner Davenport as he leaves. Sorry, Patrick. So this mayor and commission is seeking to transform this community. And they're using a variety of tools to do that. You'll note earlier this year, they've decided to take $4 million of our fund balance and create what's called a prosperity package. And they are still working through what that is, but they mean to impact the community, make a meaningful shift in some of the conditions that we've struggled with for so long. Secondly, as you heard last week, through the SPLOST, they want to transform Bethel Homes in a partnership with the Housing Authority and some private partners to create, a much better environment for the people that live there. They are also looking at other tools, and one of which we're here tonight to talk to you about, and those are called tax allocation districts. And these are used extensively in Georgia, in Atlanta, in cities as small as Rome. I've actually been a part of that back in Rome when I was county manager there. I brought Dan McCrae here, who is an attorney with Seyfarth Shaw. He's going to talk to you and educate you about what a TAD is and why you are a necessary partner to the mayor and commission on this. And I'll give you just a little bit to kind of orient you so that you can better understand what Dan's going to tell you. But he has been in this business a long time. And he's a very knowledgeable person. We're lucky to have him working with us. So what this is where the mayor and commission will create a redevelopment area. And within that area, they can put multiple TADs, tax allocation districts. And what that does is as of January 1st of any given year, there's a certain baseline value, okay? And if there is pending development that may not happen and needs some assistance, then that's where you can use tax allocation districts. And it can go for public infrastructure, it can go for private capital. There's a number of uses, and he'll go into that. And where they're looking at right now is the Newton Bridge area, Southern Mills, and then around downtown. And there's some pending development that has approached and said, look, sometimes it's a but for some assistance, this won't happen and nothing will transform. And so what we do is the baseline happens, and any growth within that TAD, and up until however many years the TAD is set for, generates extra taxes. And those taxes can be earmarked for infrastructure and development that will help the development actually happen. Does that make sense?
In that area.
In that area. And Dan's going to go through that with you. We're here to not throw everything at you at one time. So we want to educate you on this, allow you time to think about it, allow the mayor and commission to finalize what this TAD looks like and what it's going to do. And we would like to return to you in the near future. We need to certify this TAD in the redevelopment area by December 31st, because as I said, January 1st is that whatever's in place at that time is what the baseline is. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Dan McCrae.
Ceremonial passing of the clicker. I am not just a lawyer, but I'm a soft-spoken lawyer, so I'm going to come over here and I hope y'all can hear me okay. We talked about PABs and TABs and now TADs. I'm going to give you another one. There's TIFs. Everywhere in the country except Georgia, it's tax increment financing. In Georgia, it's a tax allocation district. It's not a district like the school district, because the school district has an administrative body, which is you all. The tax allocation district is a district which presents an opportunity, as Blaine said, for partnership. So I want to be respectful of your time. It's 7:25. Tell me how much time we have. And I guarantee you I'll finish.
7:30.
You're wrong.
Just a little humor.
2 minutes.
when it
Yeah,
gets to be
that's what I do.
8:30, you'll be sorry you said that.
No, it just
All right,
scared.
so let's, no, it does. So what is a TAD? I'll get out of your way. As I said, this is it's not a thing, it's a district. It's a tool for redevelopment. And it uses, as Blaine said, the positive tax increment. It takes nothing away from the taxes that the school district is already getting. The idea is that by investing within the district, you cause growth that would not happen but for the use of this tool. And that's I like being in school. I like data visualization. That's the classic TAD diagram. It shows the money that you're getting, continuing on. It shows the growth being used for redevelopment, and when the TAD burns off, it shows a vastly increased digest being shared. So, and this uses a 20-year period. A TAD expires when the redevelopment costs are paid, and those are spelled out in the plan that is approved. But a TAD normally lasts 20 years because it can be 15, 20, it can be whatever. But it takes a while to make good things happen. They don't just happen. So why? Urban Land Institute, I respect them. They're a real estate think tank. And they give you some reasons to use a TAD. I'm not going to read those to you. If anybody would like to have a copy of this presentation, it's on my website, danmcrae.com, DANMCRAE.com, or email Blaine or me.
I can email it to them.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you very much. This is the lady gets everything done. Thank you. So done, you got it. And this is, I kind of like, this is a fairly harsh slide here about looking the private sector in the eye and saying, put your money where your mouth is, but it works that way. These are examples of how TADs are used. I have worked on them. Most recently, we set up a TAD in Statesboro for a soccer stadium that anchored a mixed-use development. They got that community of Publix grocery store, because down in South Georgia, there's not many Publix grocery stores. Done them in Macon Bibb for the 2nd Street redevelopment, and Warren Robbins for Watson Boulevard. You don't see a TAD every day. But let me just ask a question. I believe in asking y'all questions, and you'll ask me questions. So when do you think that Athens Clarke approved tax allocation districts, redevelopment powers for the local government? 2010. I'm going to give you an award. It was 2006, but that was a lot closer than I thought anybody would get. So it's been 13 years. It takes us 13 years to be an overnight success. So we're looking at with the cooperation and partnership with the school district, getting started with the tax allocation district to do some of these things here. And these are the requirements. So you're urbanized. I was born in Dublin, Georgia, grew up in McRae. Yes, Athens is urbanized compared to where I grew up, and served by sewer. But the area itself has to be one of these things: a blighted or distressed area, a deteriorating area, or an area with inadequate infrastructure. So you see, the law spells out some rules. You can't just do a TAD anywhere. I think California did them anywhere. But in Georgia, you can't do that. The process looks at what type of TAD you're going to do. A lot of these are done project-specific. Maybe this wasn't, I think, the first TAD in Georgia, but it's gotten the most publicity. Atlantic Station, which was a steel company. I actually walked the grounds of Atlantic Station when it was still a steel company. It was closed down, but the steel plant was still there. Classic example, that's a project TAD. An area TAD is like the Beltline in Atlanta, which is Atlanta shoreline, but you don't have to be Atlanta to have something like the Beltline created to be the use of the TAD. Project TADs usually come from developers. Area TADs usually come from local governments that are trying to solve problems. So, yes, the General Assembly passed the act. The voters approved it. In Athens Clarke, it's the unified government that's the redevelopment agency. And I don't want to skip over the redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan is the strategy. The redevelopment plan states the justification for calling this a TAD. It spells out who the participants are. It gives you, at least in broad outline, what you're going to spend the money on. And so there's transparency to it. The plan is prepared. As you see, there's a hearing for the public and preceded by notice, and then it's approved by the local government, preceded by notice. But these tax allocation districts don't work without the partnership of the school district. So, for example, the Statesboro TAD that I just mentioned had the city and the county and the school district participating in it. So, the key to the plan is the but-for determination, which means that but for the use of this tool, redevelopment would not be expected in this area. And I spent some time getting my head into the statistics. I told you I was a data geek. And demographics of some of the areas in Athens, Clarke that Blaine has mentioned, and I think they qualify, and I think we believe that too. But again, the critical date is to have your TAD in place effective as of December 31st of a year, because you take a snapshot of your tax digest, and in Georgia, January 1st is tax lien day. So you remember my diagram, that base down at the bottom, number one, is not touched, but you need to know what that is. And it's the growth that pays into the special fund that's controlled by the sponsoring local government. That money is held in escrow to be applied to pay redevelopment costs. And another example of checks and balances is you can never create TADs that amount to more than 10% of the tax digest, and most of them are much less than that. So there are checks and balances built into the statute. The critical date is to have everything in place so that the TAD is created as of December 31st of a year. So it doesn't affect property taxes. The taxing jurisdictions do what they're going to do anyway. It doesn't increase taxes. It doesn't reduce taxes. What it does is to say that your budget in terms of the money that's going into your fund balance from the district is based on the base increment, what the value was going in. The growth is the positive tax increment, and the taxes on that value go into the special fund to be spent on redevelopment purposes. We don't need to worry about this because the unified government has already chosen the unified government as the redevelopment agency. That's the ball carrier, and it's fairly common with cities and counties to let themselves be the ball carrier. What can a TAD pay for? Money's always important. They pay redevelopment. Now, this is literally what the statute says in Georgia that costs can be spent on. Georgia is a progressive state in terms of allowing the money in the special fund to be spent even on private redevelopment costs if necessary. Most commonly spent on public infrastructure, but sometimes public infrastructure isn't the solution. You may need housing. You use tax allocation dollars to subsidize affordable housing, for example, and that's not public infrastructure.
I want to make sure I understand.
Sure.
So, if I'm a commercial developer and I'm moving to, I want to construct a commercial property that is within the TAD. My investment in that property is going to increase the value of that property. Okay?
Right. It's going to add to the tax digest.
Right. Add to the tax digest. That addition, my interest in the TAD as a developer is that will not be taken out of that district. That essentially my increase in the tax digest that I'm paying every year to the county and to the school system stays in that area for development purposes.
The answer to your question is yes. The developer doesn't control any of that. Everything functions as it normally does, except that the tax commission sends the money to the sponsoring jurisdiction to go into the special fund, and that includes the taxes on the developer's investment. But that money has to be spent in the district for redevelopment of the district. One of the advantages of TADs is, I just said the money has to be spent for the benefits of the district. There's something called the halo effect. So if you fix something up, if you improve the value, if you create a destination, if you have commerce going on, And it's going to help the adjoining areas that are not in the TAD, whose taxes continue to go into the general fund. But that, it works the way that you described it. Yes, ma'am.
And just so I'm clear on how we're involved, the school district doesn't get the extra
That's right.
that are being collected because of the redevelopment. So that's why we have to vote yes, because if property values go up and the tax status goes up, we don't get that extra.
Yes, please. If that, real seriously, that is needed. I haven't looked at the division between the unified government taxes and the school district taxes, but normally in Georgia, school district taxes are half to 2/3 of the tax bill. And it doesn't work without it. It can work in a very modest way.
I'm just trying to figure out why are we involved with this, and I think that was what I figured out.
We will need your consent, and there's a process for that. But, and we're not asking for it tonight. For one thing, it's a work session, and for another, this is just educational. But before an ask is made of the district, you'll see the plan. You'll see exactly what we've got in mind, and it will contain, not just because it's a requirement, but because it's a good idea, a school system impact analysis that will identify the school buildings in the district, the number of new students that are anticipated to be added, if there are any increases in the ELOST, and changes in residential values resulting from it. So it will be an informed decision that the board will be asked to make.
And Dr. Yeager, you'd be asked to forego it for time certain, and after that point, the TAD runs off, and all of new growth goes to the school district.
After the 20 years.
Or
Whatever,
10 years or
whatever the
15
period
years.
is, that's just an example.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to go off of her question, the school district would still get from the base?
Yes.
We just wouldn't get the.
That's right.
It's essentially freezing our taxes.
For that
For that district, for that area.
It freezes the value, but not the millage, if you're not already at your
We're
maximum.
at our max, and so that is our baseline. Get the baseline for what we get for the next how many years.
For however long it is.
Yeah.
But also consider that there are good things happening as a result of this. So it's not.
And that those values probably wouldn't go up. If the value was.
What are some of the disadvantages to this?
I'd be glad to answer that question, but it's some things to think about. A threshold for initial investments. I mean, there is a seed capital cost to this. It doesn't concern the school board, but that front end cost is borne by the unified government. TADS calls growth. I mean, if the study comes back and says you'll have 1,000 new students in the district as a result of this, you're probably going to need a new school building and some buses. I don't think that'll be the case, but I'm not an economist. We've got somebody checking on that. So you'll have that data. And this is really, California. Anybody here from California? You sure? It is possible to overdo this, and they did. California had so many special districts of all kinds that too much money was being taken away from the general fund of the local governments, and they passed a statewide law to basically abolish all of their districts, and it was chaotic for a while. But it's okay now.
Prop 13, right?
Well, that's a factor, but really, seriously, this was something that California overdid. Now, again, checks and balances in our law, we're pretty sensible folks in Georgia. We've got that 10% cap anyway. But, I mean, it is a fact that the money that's spent in the TAD doing great things in the TAD is not going into the school district's fund balance. It's not going into the unified government's general fund. So you have to consider the trade-off that's being made.
And can I just, you said we're going to see the plan or what the anticipated, what it's going to look like. And I presume, given our unified government's approach that, so I'm not from California, but I am from Seattle. And the city of Seattle has undergone some terrifically terrible developments that have displaced large sectors of the poor people that used to live in Seattle because Amazon moved in. And so I guess I would want to make sure that whatever plan we had wasn't displacing our poor members of our community in in search of the importing affluence for the city of
Dan,
affluence.
if I might, so the Newton Bridge is really based on the West Fox redevelopment,
Yeah.
and they're going to have assistance to make that happen. So the TAD's going to be drawn around that in Southern Mills because there's redevelopment happening there. And then the downtown one is going to be around the Classic Center. There's some peripheral development that the Mayor and Commission charged the Classic Center to bring more higher paying jobs downtown and more daytime activity. And so that is, those are pending developments that we feel good are going to happen. So create the TADs before they happen. And
I see. Yeah.
but they need assistance in the form of this TAD and some redevelopment funds in order to actually happen. So so there's no widespread, and you'll see the plan, and we'll send it to you through the superintendent in advance of our next meeting, so you have a chance to look at it, digest it, and then we can explain it.
So is Bethel in this?
No, not currently. Now, the Mayor and Commission haven't finalized the districts.
From downtown, Classic Center, they're a block away.
Well,
Big headline today.
Well, so, and just briefly, right now, Columbia Brookside is appealing its taxes, and it says its taxes should be based on the tax credits and be valued much lower than it is. So if they prevail, it could be that, and this is hard to get your mind wrapped around, the redeveloped Bethel would be worth less than the existing Bethel. And in that case, you actually lose increment, you know, then you have to make that back up to go. And I know that I can talk more about that, but there's some, and because if the SPLOST passes, we don't need redevelopment funds to make Bethel happen.
Right.
We're going to make it happen, or the Mayor and Commission will. Sorry, Dan.
That's all true. You know, we had 10 years from 2007 to 17, in some places longer, when we didn't have a positive tax increment, we had a negative tax increment. And on the topic of money, somebody said the best way to help poor people is to get them money, and these jobs will come from these TADs based on what I understand about them, and they're the kind of jobs that are available to people, that people that live in that area will be able to.
Okay, you mentioned 2006, and I know that I was on this board, but a TAD presentation was made to the Board of Education, whatever then it was in 2006. And when you started the presentation earlier, you mentioned Newton Bridge Road. And I do recall that Newton Bridge Road was mentioned, and several other areas mentioned because of empty buildings, et cetera, et cetera. Now, evidently something is getting ready to happen on Newton Bridge Road, because I think I recall reading in the newspaper where the old General Times building had been empty for years. Well, maybe it's already started, I don't know. Can you help me with that?
I'm aware of 2 projects in that area, but if Wayne says the district hasn't been defined, I mean, that takes a vote of the commission.
Okay.
But I do a lot of work with economic development, community development, redevelopment. As a general rule, this is a type of incentive. It doesn't have to incent developers because it can go into public infrastructure, which really is an incentive. But it can be used other ways too. When it's used as a developer incentive, you're looking for a quid pro quo. There's a development agreement that goes with it where the developer makes commitments, and it's a commitment to, it can be whatever the deal is, but it can be to spend so much money, create so many jobs, do affordable housing, build a development that's larger than he might otherwise have done, build it sooner than he might otherwise have done, do it to better quality than he otherwise would have done. So if you see a green sprout, you want to nourish that green sprout, and this gives the tools to do it with.
I was going to touch on the other one, trying to work my way through it, but I wanted to make sure that there was a place in there for commitment.
Oh, yeah. You know, Georgia has a provision in our Constitution against gifts and gratuities. You can't give stuff away in Georgia. So there's got to be a bargain, and there will be a bargain.
So my question was related to that, and also what Mr. Worthy was saying. So is there some type of application process or something for the developers to benefit from this?
There would be.
Okay.
It's, you know, Blaine mentioned Rome. Rome has a program, and Gainesville has program. Gainesville, Georgia has an excellent tax allocation district program with applications and good at administration. And I'm sure this community will have the same thing. There has to be a process to this.
Right. What was the other place, Gainesville and who else?
I mentioned Rome, but there are many other examples. Gainesville is a good example. I know that Gwinnett County is beginning to look at taking their base of TADs. Bill Ricketts looking into the two. There are a number of success stories in the state of Georgia, but nobody was very successful for 10 years because of the way the economy was. The Camp Creek TAD, y'all will get me started now. Camp Creek TAD at East Point is a real good example. You been to East Point recently?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they're going to be all right, but they're already all right at Camp Creek. That TAD worked, and they paid those bonds off early to do it. I guess that's one other thing. People associate TADs with tax allocation bonds, but there's another way to do it, which is pay as you go. Pay as you go means the developer fronts the money, and when the increment rises and there's some money, if there's a deal in place, he might get reimbursed for it. Bonds are pay as you use. You forward fund the investment, and the taxes are collected as those who the investment was spent on, the property that was spent on. But you don't have to do that. And the bond markets these days are very disciplined. You don't see deals getting done on a spreadsheet like you did in 2007, which was one of the problems. So you're not committing, nobody's committing to issue bonds or incur debt. TAD bonds aren't debt anyway in constitutional terms. They're revenue bonds. The local government's not liable for the repayment of the bonds. If there's an increment, they get paid, and if there's not, they don't get paid. So TAD bonds are very conservatively done these days, and they're almost always paid off early. But East Point Camp Creek was a very early success story of bonds getting paid off early.
And typically with the businesses or development that's happening, these are larger businesses, right?
Not necessarily. Y'all gonna get me started, I warned you about it. But let me tell you about something. Atlanta perhaps has not done the best job that could possibly have been done with their TADs. But with the East Side TAD right now, they have got a career builders program. And there's something going on next door tonight over at the Career Academy. It's really exciting to be here. But they actually have a program where they've taken some of the TAD money and they have used it to create a fund, to provide small subsidies, not large subsidies, to people that live in the district that may own some real estate. Usually it's real estate, commercial real estate, but not exclusively. They provide training. There's a mentorship program. That all comes out of the TAD money. It's got to be legal, and there's some rules, but really some thought can go into this, and some beautiful things can come out of it. Are there other questions about this? I think I have another slide on this. Oh, execution risk. If you have a private sector development partner, they can go out of business. I mentioned that if you're not liable for repaying the bonds, but if the project fails, then nothing will happen. And you want to be conservative when you're creating your financial plan. And this is probably more detailed than you want, but those are some things you need to think about. Where I was. Okay, so we're talking about redevelopment costs. These are the sort of things that can be paid. As I say, Georgia's pretty liberal about what can be built into the plan. But it's not an entitlement program. It's a bargain. It creates the funds to do things with it. In most cases, the money's spent on public infrastructure, but you're not limited to that in the state of Georgia. The local government controls the funds, so they're not floating around loose. They're in an escrow account. There are various sources, but I listed them in the interest of just liking to talk about this. But all we're talking about here is the positive tax increment from property taxes, not the general fund. So whatever the school district may get in the way of other sources of income from public revenues, or the unified government may get, is not touched by this. Business license fees continue to be collected and paid, and it's just property tax. Special features, these bonds, although they're revenue bonds, have lien status, so they're very secure in terms of the bondholders' rights. There's potential for a backup assessment, but we're not talking about that. The benefits, I guess this is probably a good place to close, when I've already gone to the slides about the downsides. Of the upside of this is in these slides. So you take sites that aren't competitive. I mean, if you've got bad streets layouts, I was talking with somebody earlier today about it, and apparently some parts of the area that we're looking at, you can't get an emergency vehicle in. You can't get a fire truck in because they can't make the turn. So you can imagine if a business is not going to locate where they can't, I mean, what would their insurance rate be if they couldn't get fire protection? Economic redevelopment without raising taxes, that's right. The taxes get recirculated back into the district, but you get investment and growth without having to raise taxes. You don't lose your existing tax base. You're paying attention to areas that otherwise would not have attention paid to it because there wouldn't be the tool to put the work there. Employment opportunities, all sorts of jobs. Not geo debt, doesn't affect your credit rating, and there's the halo effect that I mentioned, that it will have an effect outside its borders. And that windfall, you know, whatever the period is, however long it is, short or long, when it burns off, all of that increment then becomes available to go into your general fund. So that's how TADs work in Georgia, and they, if you use it right, it's a very, very good tool. And those were some good questions. Are there any others? I got all night. I will never run for elected office. I don't know how you do it.
Well, if I might, just next steps. We're putting the finishing touches on the draft redevelopment plans. We need to take it to the Mayor and Commission and make sure they fully understand and support it. And then at that point, we would forward that to the superintendent to be distributed to you for your review. And again, we'd like to ask permission to come back to you and explain and answer your questions about it. And then you would be asked to pass a resolution at a certain point where you would pledge your increment and participate in the TAD. And so you will see in the redevelopment plan the areas that are targeted, the uses by which these funds would be used for, and it would explain what the plan is overall. So we appreciate your time and attention, and thank you for letting us know.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Madam President, board members, we have a second presentation. That's from our Chief of Human Resources, Ms. Duke.
Good evening, everyone. I also have Michael Harris with me tonight. He is our Executive Director of Talent Management. He's going to come up as well and help me with this presentation, although he doesn't seem to be willing right now. So thank you for the opportunity for me to share a little bit about the work we've been doing over the past year. And I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can because I know we're going a little long tonight, but please interrupt and ask questions if you need to. The first few slides are just the strategic priorities that our work aligns to, so I'm going to flip through those. They're there for you to refer to if you want to, but by the numbers. So Michael's going to talk about these first couple of slides. I think.
Yes. So good evening, everyone. So of course in CCSD, our goal is to make sure that we have the best instructors in front of our children in our schools, in every classroom. And so last year, before our teachers left for the summer, just to get some baseline information about how we support teachers in our district, we surveyed teachers in their first through third year in the district. And so we gathered some really great information from them, but these were just some of the highlights that we needed to kind of think about what type of support would we provide teachers coming into our district to retain them and making sure that they are getting the things that they need in order to make sure the kids are getting the outcomes that we expect. And so some of those things that we looked at were the fact that we had 53% of our teachers that were in the years 1 through 3 were first year teachers. We had 258 teachers that completed the survey. 53% of those teachers were in their first year. Secondary subjects were the most represented. We had a huge number of middle school teachers in our district. We've been hiring a lot of middle school teachers. Based on some of the reading, those articles that you were provided, a lot of the information, a lot of the research talks about we're not producing a lot of secondary teachers. Here in Athens, we get about, I want to say the number is 70% of the teachers that we get from UGA are elementary teachers. So we really struggle around that secondary piece. 38% of our teachers are UGA grads, which is great. We would like to see that even more. However, we know that a lot of universities are struggling with the recruitment of getting teachers into the profession or into those programs. We also surveyed the teachers about what is it that you need so that we can really focus our work and the resources around to support them better. And those 3 areas were classroom management, student engagement, and of course content development. They needed to really understand what the standards are asking them to make sure students know and understand and are able to do and have time to do that. We also wanted to find out, as we think about recruitment, where are our teachers coming from and what preparation programs are they attending coming into us? Of course, we see 38% from UGA, 9% from the Georgia TAP, which is an alternative cert, but we also wanted to break that down from other alternative certification programs. And there are many others. I just wanted to list a few as we're getting prepared to go out and recruit teachers for the 19-20 school year. This kind of gives us an idea of where we need to target or where we can target those programs and those folks coming out.
So just some more data. So last year, on the first day of school, we had 24 vacancies. This year, we cut it to 14, which we're really proud of. Unfortunately, we're still right around 14. It kind of fluctuates day to day. People are coming and going. So also our retention rate has creeped up a little bit, not significant, but a little bit. The past 3 years prior to 17-18, it was around 77%. 17-18, it was 82%, and this current year, we retained 84% of our staff. Yes, sir.
So good question. So to turn that around, before 2017-18, our attrition, or whatever you want to call it, was 23% roughly?
So 17-18, I'll be honest, what happened, I don't have data for 16-17, and our HR system doesn't allow us to do historical data, so I just didn't capture it that year. The 2 years prior, it was 77% both years. So
like in 2016-17?
Right.
Wow. That's significantly above the national average.
Yeah, we're doing, So we hired 182 new teachers this year, and that gives you a breakdown of their ethnicity. By and large, 3/4 of them were white, and the next largest group were our Black African American at 34 of those. Next is our all teacher group, and if I flip back and forth, you'll see we're trending, very similarly overall. Again, 3/4 are white, and then the rest of that 1/4 is our minority teachers. Yes, ma'am.
Is new teachers the first year, or do you call them the 1 through 3?
New teachers that we hired. They could be veteran teachers that we hired, but they're new to us.
In their first year? Okay, not 1 to 3?
Right, yes.
Okay.
And this was from this year, right?
This is our current. So when you look at us compared to national data, I found the most recent national data I could find was 2012. I admit that's not the most recent. But the national data from 1987 to 2012, there was a trend of Black teachers declined from 7.5% to 6.5%. Currently, we have 21.2% of our teaching force is Black teachers. And the data from the Governor's Office of Student Achievement in 2017, which is their most recent, showed our state at 20.8. So that just shows that we're kind of on trend in the state of Georgia. The numbers, are not as diverse out in the Midwest as they are here. In 2012, the percent of minority teachers in the country was 17.3, and ours right now is 26.1. So then we look at our paraprofessionals. We have 228 paras, and that's when the pie chart starts to flip. And then our administrators is on a split, diverse down the middle. You know, we have a pretty good split. Yes, ma'am.
On the, I think it was the slide before this.
The paras. That
The one that was the CCSE compared to national data.
This one? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where it says in 2012, the percent of minority teachers rose.
Nationally, yeah.
Nationally?
Mm-hmm.
So that includes
All
non-white.
non-white.
Okay.
So-
So we don't.
So
necessarily
even though
know.
the black declined, the overall minority rose during that time period in the nation.
Just one clarification. Pre-K teachers are included in this and
Yes.
pre-K growth.
Okay, so then we look at what our educational attainment do our teachers have. This is, again, just our new teachers, 182 of them. Most of them have their bachelor's, but you can see we do have quite a few that have advanced degrees that we hired this year. And that's when it doesn't look like our all-teacher group. So I guess it just kind of shows that with the UGA right in our back door that our teaching staff are working on their advanced degrees. It gets them more money, so it makes sense for them to get that if they can afford to. Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible to find out our degree levels of our paraprofessionals?
We don't capture that because they're not paid based on their degrees. We could survey them, but there are many of them that do have their college degrees. We target them for, we're going to talk about that in just a minute, about teacher pipeline. So then we look at the experience in teaching of our new to Clarke County teachers this year. And so 119 of them were in year 0 through 5, 28 years 6 through 10, and then it just kind of gets down from there. So we did hire, I noticed it when we were at New Teacher Orientation, Dr. Means asked everyone to raise their hand that were not first year and then not. And we did have quite a bit of experienced teachers that were hired this year. Yes, sir.
So do we have it broken down, because that's a big chunk, 0 through 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why you did 0 through 5, because if you keep them after 5 years, you're doing good.
Yep.
But do we know how many of those would be, I think you gave the number already, but how many were first year teachers?
That was
That
for
was from-
previous years.
right, that was at the end
I
of
can get that to
18.
you. Do you mind writing that down for me, Lisa? Just the number of first year teachers out of our 182. And so then if you look at all of our teachers, it's spread out like pretty equally. Yes, sir.
How would that look compared to other districts in the state? Are we
I
young?
don't know.
Are we old?
I don't know. I don't even know. GOSA probably has that data, and I can see if they do, and if they do, I'll let you know how we compare. Current administrators that have been internally promoted. I know that's been some of the discussion items, so I just wanted to kind of give you an idea. If their assistant principal are up and they rose in the ranks in the school district, that's represented here. Well over half of our current administrators were internally promoted. Mr. Davis, this is for you. So we did an exit survey this year of our teachers that were departing. We had 63 responses, which is fairly good for a survey. And you can see the largest reason we asked them why they were leaving was a relocation or a spouse transfer. That could include that they were moving to be closer to their own family, or their spouse maybe had a job transfer, that kind of thing. The next reason was no reason. And then, unfortunately, the third highest reason was lack of support. So again, it's 11 people out of 63. We had around 200 leave, but certainly something we wouldn't want to ignore.
Then I know that we tried this a few years ago, and in terms of surveying, did we do it differently this time? Because I know last time we didn't have a real good
Return rate.
And are we doing something differently this time, trying to raise it, or is it just too many problems?
Well, we send it out electronically, and if they choose to do it, they do. There's other questions that we ask that we can use to inform the support. We ask more specific questions about why, and, it's a lot of commentary, but it's something that we can share with our principals and ourselves as we try to train and offer PL for teachers.
Be honest with you, when I saw that number when I was reading on the board docs, I was surprised because before I retired, we did the same kind of thing, in terms of why teachers are leaving. And that number was nowhere near 63. It was low, low, low.
And
Teachers
Mr.
just don't
Davis-
respond to it.
Right, and Mr. Davis, we did a paper survey in years past, and this is electronic, and, people.
I'm just
are
wondering if
quicker
they were
to-
done on the school level, if we would find out anything different.
People get kind of nervous, and I don't,
Yeah,
they don't
I know
want to,
they
they don't
don't.
want to answer
I know.
honestly, even though they're on their way out, they don't want
Right.
to maybe burn that bridge if they
Right.
need to come back, but
You
there were
took-
some, honest and direct comments on
You
that.
took the words out of my mouth. I did that seat of several years, and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And it's exactly what you said. They get nervous. They think that you're trying to trap them into maybe giving them a bad reference because they're leaving you,
Right.
which is not true, but,
Is there any way to do it anonymously?
These are anonymous.
These are?
And
That's
actually,
why I
I
said
had
it's
one
free.
teacher that didn't want to do a survey, but they wanted to come talk to me and let me know what had happened, and so that was valuable as well. I can't do that 200 times probably, but.
Right.
Yes.
That was actually my question. So the way you did this, was this a survey where the data went to kind of a third party so it would be protected, or did you just?
It came back to me.
Oh, it just came back to you.
But it was done by a third-party software, so I didn't have identifiable information when it came back.
And then the other
I
question?
can tell what school, but that's it, if they told us.
The other question was the category lack of support, was that the exact wording for it?
No, sir. What it was, they gave reasons and so that it was just free text. And so what I had a staff member do is to categorize it. And there are varying degrees of lack of support is what that meant for people. But
Did that mean emotional or
It
professional? or-
mostly meant professional support. A lot of times they would specifically say the principal. They didn't feel like they were supported by the principal.
But I don't see anything on here about pay. Oh, that's interesting.
Nobody gave that as a reason.
And how many, okay, this is from the teachers that left this past year.
In the summer,
This
like
summer.
in May.
How many teachers, like, so out of, the 63 responded, out of how many?
About 200.
About 200 that left, okay.
Were there other questions on this survey?
There were.
Because I was gonna say, if you fill out a survey and then say no reason given, that's.
Yeah, there, and it was almost all free text. We let people just say what they wanted to say so we could get really good information and not pigeonhole them into multiple choice answers. And so it's gonna, be very useful when we're developing PL.
And then another question I had was, do teachers typically, they don't usually write resignation letters?
They do.
They do.
Sometimes they're very brief, sometimes they're a page long of how frustrated they are. It varies. But a lot of times they're also very nice, appreciate the opportunity.
All right, so let's talk about some of the strategies that we're putting in place or we have in place as we move into the 1920 school year, really trying to make sure we have that workforce that we need. So right now, we're revising all of our recruitment materials. We know that those millennials out there, they need to know that they have a purpose coming to the district, and what is that purpose? So we need to make sure we target that and communicate that when we're at career fairs or job fairs. We need to focus on our school websites. They go right to the laptop, they're looking at districts. That's what really pulls them in and makes them want to come and work for an organization. So we're really going to be targeting that work. We know we have to look at diverse platforms. Where do we post jobs? There's a lot of social media out there, so we know we need to really jazz that up a little bit and make sure folks know that we are a viable option for them. We are the best option for them, right?
Can I interrupt for one
Sure.
second, Michael? So there was a day in June that we had a really large uptick of applications, and I was like, so random. It was just a random day in June. And so I was running around asking our application specialist, what did you do that day? And she posted jobs on Facebook. That was all. And so we just can't minimize, I wouldn't think that would matter. I mean, I would think that if you're looking for a job, you're going to look for a job in all the traditional places that I would look for a job, but, you know, I know I'm 50-something years old. And so we can't minimize the impact that our social media has.
And we know we need to continue working with UGA. We need to get into those classrooms of those programs and really talk to those young people who are sitting there eager and ready to get out there into the workforce and really try to get them in here so they can get that hands-on experience.
Related to that, I heard you mention, I know we've mentioned UGA a bit. I love UGA. It's requisite. And we also have, Piedmont College, to be fully honest, that's my place of employment. I'm not trying to plug them, but also UNG and Athens Tech. Although Athens Tech does not offer the bachelor's degree, they, if I'm not mistaken, they offer an associate's, right? So, since you provided that statement, are there efforts under that to reach out to these other schools as well?
Absolutely.
We place student teachers from all those places that you just named. So we protect them because they're so small. UGA will take up every student teacher slot we have if we let them. So we do make sure that we leave room for some of the smaller schools that don't have as many. But we have right now student teachers from Piedmont, UNG. Gosh, Karen, do you have some from Athens Tech?
I was going to say, I have students from actually all 4 schools represented currently in the Early Learning Center, student teaching or having an internship opportunities within our building, including Career Academy.
And so part of the work is making sure that we get into those universities and colleges and talk about our program and how we can support them. Yes. We're actually part of our, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go finish what you're going to say.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, you know, we talked about the career fairs and you know, we've talked about as a board trying to free up as much as possible human resources to not just talk to students, but actually be able to offer something concrete when you're face to face with a candidate that you want. And I understand the difficulties of trying to recruit someone with a contract when you don't know if you have a job. At the same time, other school districts, apparently there's a kind of a race to Christmas type thing where we want to sign people up even before the second semester of the school year. So you know, what can we do as a board to allow us to, you know, compete with these school districts that are signing people up very early?
So, good question. We actually, Dr. Thomas went with her daughter on a college visit, and she was recruiting for us, and she was out visiting, and she talked to some people, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Thomas, that were graduating. She was visiting in September, and they were graduating in May, and they already were under contract. You know, I know. Jeez. So, because they're in demand. And we turned our principals loose in January, and we didn't wait for openings. I told everyone overhire because we're sitting here with 14 vacancies, and that hasn't stopped to be the case in the 7 years I've been in HR. We always seem to fall short. So I want them to hire early, but we've got to come up with more creative and different ways. At career fairs I do go to, there will be a line behind the recruiter with signing bonuses. And, you know, we need to get in that game. We need to start doing that kind of thing, thinking differently. And Dr. Means uses all the sports analogy. We need to start thinking like Kirby Smart, and we need to, Michael Harris is going to start making relationships and figuring out, with social media, you can target audiences in certain college towns. And so if they're in the College of Education, we can target an ad to them and do some really creative stuff and you know, that catches people's attention and gives him the opportunity to go out there and be more like a sports recruiter than what we think of as a teacher recruiter, and make those relationships with those students early, like in the junior year. If they're signing them as entering seniors, then we need to hit them the summer prior to their senior year.
So is there anything from a board governance standpoint that okay, well, I mean, that needs to be out there then,
right?
You know, and we don't want to wait until February to talk about it.
Right, right.
We attended 10 universities and colleges last year, and there were 45 graduates, and there's 25 districts trying to get those graduates.
Right.
I mean, it's very competitive, and of course, all the other districts, they have those sign-on bonuses. I mean, it was very evident
Right.
that it was high market.
Yeah, I met a young lady in Birmingham, and I recruited her hard and heavy, and I invited her to come to Athens. We're going to put her up, you know, for a weekend, let her come tour the schools. I asked Dr. Means to call her personally and invite her, and she just, as the kids say, she ghosted us because in that room, there was something that was more appealing to her. And, you know, it's a lot of factors. There's a lot of, it's not always just about money. You know, it's just not.
Can we get some football tickets?
We've got a sister-in-law employed next door, so maybe we can.
Where are we with the pipeline of our students who are here? Like, you know, looking at students who are interested in being teachers and maybe developing a program where we kind of guide them, because a lot of our, it's not a lot, but it's a great deal of our students, they go off, like the HBCUs, and I know some who we end up teaching very nearby, you know, instead they, you know, want to come on or they commute. So where are we with looking at students who are interested in teaching?
High school students.
Yeah, high school students.
Absolutely.
Our current students.
Absolutely. I just had a meeting with Dr. Faison. Yes.
And I'm on the committee.
Yes, we're on the committee. And we are charged with thinking about how do we go into our schools and start having these conversations. So we had a great brainstorming, you know, meeting the other day, and we're looking forward to that work. Absolutely.
Let me include something here.
Yes, sir.
And I'm happy you brought that up. Well, Mr. Harris is not in here. When you're at the high school level, you have club affiliation. Many of them have come through, they shake our hands, FFA, they come through on a regular basis. Future Farmers of America, okay? FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America. FHA, Future Homemakers of America. What about FTA, Future Teachers of America?
Yeah.
That's all in the works. I mean, it may not be that particular organization, but we've got a faculty member who's working with us to develop both the entire track. So it's not just going to be a club meeting, you know, once a week or whatever. We're talking about internships. We're talking about a career track.
I understand exactly what you're talking about. I've mentioned this before. In fact, I talked about this when I was a principal. If I'm not mistaken, I think Muscogee County, they jumped all over it. I don't know whether they're still doing it. And there was one other school system, but I can't recall what that school system, what school system it was. But I think it would work.
Yeah.
You know?
And to be clear, Dr. Morgan Faison is our professor in residence here at Career Academy. She's with UGA.
Absolutely.
Dr. Thomas, can you share that 4 and 4 thing that you heard about?
This past weekend, we were in Greensboro, North Carolina, and they have a 4 and 4 where the students, 4 years of college, and then they commit to giving back 4 years of teaching in the state of North Carolina.
And the school district pays that up front, their
And
college
it's paid
up
up front, and I'm actually not sure if the district or if it's a district and
partnership?
state.
Okay.
It seemed like it might be part state paid as well. So I got
So that's
that
something we're
number.
gonna look into, and
Got
she got the
that number
contact.
for her.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
there's all different kind of ways to.
And
draw
again,
people in.
Dr. Means, you know, this is one, you know, this type of conversation really, to me, brings up the fact that when we met with the Georgia School Board Association, they were talking about starting the budget early, you know, and thinking in terms of, because these are the kinds of things that we need to put in the budget if we're going to go in that direction. And so I just throw that out there.
So some of the new strategies, we have an induction program where we are making sure that every new teacher that has come into our district this year has a mentor in the building. Every school has a lead mentor where they're getting some very high leverage professional learning. That professional learning is coming from the instructional services department, so we're collaborating that way to make sure that folks are getting exactly the support that they need in order to be successful in the classroom. So we're excited about kicking that off this year. Of course, we know that talking to folks that are moving from out of state, I've had many conversations with them, where do I live, and really trying to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce and working with realtors. I mean, those are just conversations we need to start because they want to know where's a viable place for me to live if I'm relocating. The student loan refinance program, as we share with you, there's a lot of parapros that we have in our district that are committed to the district, and we're reaching out to them to see if they're interested. We're looking at partnering with Middle Georgia University because they are developing a program for parapros who want to earn certification to go through a online program where they only need to go to campus once a month.
We also reached out to two of our credit unions that are really good partners in education with us to see, can you help us? We've got folks that can't afford to go to college, that maybe need some help with some loans, and they have come up with some personal loans that can help pay for like Georgia TAP if they wanted to do that. So we're trying to make it as easy and accessible as we can, because the cost, for TAP is about $4,500 if they finish it in 3 years, two years, and I think 3 years is $6,000. So it's expensive when you're on a para salary.
And one of our strategies that we'll be implementing beginning next week is really going out to the schools, having conversations with parapros, and we have hundreds of student teachers. So we're sending a special invite out to those student teachers to say, look, if you're mission-driven, results-oriented, we want you. And so bring your resume, bring your certification area, because we want to engage you in conversations now so that we know who we have as we move forward. So we
want to stay in contact with those people. No exaggeration, at any given time we have 500 to 600 teachers in our district, and so we only hire 200. Seems like we could make the staff work. Yes, sir.
When you all are recruiting teachers from other states, because there's some states, they don't have a requirement like the GACE that you have to pass in Georgia to become certified. Do you all mention reciprocity? Or see, once they come from a different state, they don't have to take that test the first year. Right. They give them a year, to prepare for it.
Right. There are some states that Georgia has reciprocity with, and they'll transfer their certificates flat. They don't have to do anything.
Oh, okay.
But not all of them. So it's kind of this, there's no blanket answer to give somebody at a career fair. We kind of have to know, okay, what's your situation? But yes, they can get a provisional certificate when they present with either they're in an educator's program or they are one. We can get them provisionally certified, and they have some time to take this test.
And you all mentioned the TAP program, which I'm familiar with. You ever heard about Troops for Teachers? I guess they still have that. Have you heard of that?
Troops for
Troops
Teachers?
for
No,
Teachers.
sir.
It's funded through the federal government, connected to the military.
Okay. That's a new one too.
Do some checking on that, because it's free. And you're talking about people that have been in the military for several years and coming out, and some of them have degrees and they wanted to teach.
Right.
And like I said, years ago, the feds would pay for it.
Okay.
Troops for Teachers.
We also are collaborating with GOSA. We have 25 first-year teachers in our district that are receiving, besides the mentor in the school, they are receiving recess support ongoing throughout this school year, just to make sure that we can build their capacity to do the work. We've placed those resources in our transformational schools, and so Hillsman, Fowler, Stroud, and J.J. Harris. Yes. Yes.
2 questions. One of the teachers that left, I think you mentioned 200, and then we had 63 that responded. Do we know how many of them were first-year teachers, or do we, based on?
I believe that was one of the questions we asked.
Was it?
I have to go back and look.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's anonymous, it would have had to have been a question we asked, so.
Okay. I know that a lot of teachers that leave are first year from that first,
Right.
I think, for one of these spots, but I wasn't sure if we knew that. And then, I guess I'm curious with the strategies, so the new strategies and the previous strategies, what strategies exist to increase the likelihood that people who have been here, right, who are not, you know, so we're talking about recruitment, but there's also the other piece, right? Retention and like teachers that have been here for years, like how we can create a more meaningful or quality experience for them.
So
To the degree that's within your, you know.
One thing Mr. Harris did was develop the lead mentors. So that is our veteran teachers that are acting as the lead mentor in the building. There's a tiny amount of money that we're giving them, but it's about building leadership capacity and helping them be more connected to developing their colleagues. You know, there's a lot of research around, you know, that kind of thing. Did you have something else you want to add?
Yeah, it's absolutely, that's a great question. And what we're finding is we have 28 veteran teachers who are taking this role on, and we're really wanting something like this in our schools. They wanted some type of leadership role. They weren't quite ready for the instructional coach or things like that. But now we're building their capacity with those skills that our instructional coaches are receiving, assistant principals and principals. So we're really looking at developing that pipeline for those future leaders. You know, they're in the classroom, they love it, we want them there. But eventually, if they choose to want to move up those ranks, then we are preparing them to lead the work that we expect our leaders to do.
And so the other thing that instructional services did this year, and I think Mr. Gaskins has talked about it, was align the principal PLCs, the assistant principal PLCs, and the instructional coach PLCs. They're all getting the same material, and you're like, well, then what's that got to do with retention? But when you're building that capacity to support our teachers with our leaders, then that helps them. You know, that eliminates that reason, the lack of support. So they're getting more systemic, aligned, purposeful PL that will help them support their teachers.
As a follow-up to that, how, like with the systemic PLs, what percentage of those PLs also, do like the teachers have autonomy, some sense of autonomy? So for instance, while there may be the systems PL, like the things that we all want to be sort of on the same page about, I would imagine, like as a therapist, for instance, that we have our standards, but then there's a good bit of room to sort of, for my own philosophy, as far as like teaching and as far as like the environments that I want to create. And so how are teachers supported in their own like sense of who they are, their own professional development, and like the needs that they may have beyond what is, you know, what's seen as like paramount and systemic? Like, do they have room to like
If
be
I don't know
individuals?
what to answer, I will tell you. I don't know the answer to that. Do you?
I would say
can't
they
speak to
do.
that.
Okay.
There's an expectation of what we expect to see when we walk into a classroom, but how teachers go about getting there, that's up to them. That's their creative process. But when we walk into a classroom and we want to see kids transitioning to a work session, we know there's some characteristics that a teacher should be doing during that time and what students should be doing. And so teachers have that opportunity to create that, but we should be able to tell so that we can give them feedback on, you did a really great job, or I really didn't notice the transition to the work session. So we want to make sure that there's some alignment there, but definitely teachers have an opportunity to create and be
personal reflection day.
That's right. Thank you. You weren't giving me enough words. It's late. I'm getting tired. We built into the academic calendar this year personal work luncheon days for teachers, where we're not mandating this is, you know, what you're coming to a district PL day. These are your days to do what you need to do in the classroom.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's, and I have to do this because I heard it so much from Rita Thornton. And that is that she speaks of the time period when, to use code, the school district was not as interested in diversity as we are today. And so she says that there were teachers that were kind of pushed out of the county and are still around this area. And these are experienced teachers who, you know, may have the skill set that we're looking for. I don't know how you reach out to them. I mean, obviously they know we're here.
Right. So we do it through social media campaigns, through our career fair that we have. I can't go recruit them in Oconee County. I can't go pull them out of the classroom. They probably would get offended at that. But, we attract them to us. That's how we get them. Veteran teachers, we have to make ourselves. One of the articles you sent was about our reputation. We have to have a great reputation of being that school district that people want to come to.
Right. So. To give an example of that, what you're talking about, Mr. Davis, I had some coming to me begging to get into Clarke County because they had gone over to Oconee County. Reason being, you have teacher retirement in Oconee County, but you don't have Social Security. Okay?
They do match on the 401k.
I have two of them.
They do match on the 401k. So next up, the last bullet, I don't think you said it, did you? Or did you?
Yes.
You did? Okay, good.
The school district, yes.
Right, that's part of, building relationships. That's really important to people. We can't, overlook that piece of the work. I think that's my favorite. Yes, okay, I've got one video. This is a video that Mary made for us last year for recruitment. Can I start? So this is just a snippet of it from our teachers. Let me check this thing on my bad. Okay, go ahead.
The reason why I chose Clarke County was actually because I was born and raised in Athens and grew up going through Clarke County schools. So as a student, I always had a really positive experience here. I love the area of Athens. It's pretty much all I know. And at first I thought that I would try to get a job in Cobb County because that's where I did most of my field experience and my student teaching. But then I was thinking, I really wanted to come back and give back to my community because I had such a positive experience here. Just even outside of the building that I work in, just the Clarke County in general has a very family-oriented vibe, and everyone's always willing to help each other. So I think that's really the main thing that's helped me to stay. There's tons and tons of resources that are available to us, and I just think that this is a very good place if you are just starting out as a teacher, or even if you are coming in from some outside place.
One reason why I came to Clarke County School District is because I'm a proud graduate of Clarke County School District. I graduated from Cedar Shoals High School, right on the east side of town. And one thing that brought me back to Clarke County School District is that we have very high quality educators here in this district that work very hard to provide and to meet the needs of our students. And I aspire to grow into one of those teachers that help me while I was here in the Clarke County School District. I know the difference that people who are involved and who want to work with the community, how powerful that can be in the life of a student, how powerful that can be for a family that lives here in Clarke County.
I chose to come to work in Clarke County to be a teacher because I was looking for a place that I could call home. I was looking for a place that was full of diversity, full of a good support system, and I really think that I found that in Clarke County. I have taught in several other school systems before, and none of them really ever felt like home. But I feel at home every day when I come to work here.
So I know it sounds like that was a commercial that was scripted because it was very, things we would want to hear. We just asked them why Clarke County. That's all we asked them, and that's what we got. So I think that concludes my presentation. Are there any other questions?
I want to commend you all reducing that number from 24 to 14. The reason I'm saying that because it is a humongous shortage of teachers all the way across this country.
Yes.
And I think that you all have done very well on that because there are many school districts right here in the state of Georgia, metro area. They had to begin the school year with substitute teachers because they couldn't hire enough teachers to fill those positions. Having said that, Mr. Greg Davis, you gave us a legislative agenda for this year, and I can't recall whether this was on there, but I'm urging you to do this, to work with our state lawmakers, to work with the governor, to come up with some creative ways in terms of what Georgia can do, because if this teacher
Well, they've got a mentor program and haven't funded it.
yeah, but here's what I'm saying, because see, this teacher shortage is going to get worse. And I think I have mentioned once before, the state of Alabama is in such bad shape in terms of hiring teachers. What they've done, they passed special legislation. If a person has a 4-year degree, come work for us, and in that 4 years, you get certified to become a teacher, and if you do, you have to stick with us at least 5 years. State of Mississippi, worse. If you have a 2-year degree, come work for us, etc. And if you finish up your certification, you give us 5 years after you do it. What I'm saying, I think the state's going to have to step it up and get creative and innovative in terms of doing something about this teacher shortage. You know, it may sound good in terms of some of the things we've talked about tonight, but it's going to get worse because there are so many other things that young people can go into other than teaching. One other example, my alma mater. I mean, have still got a strong teacher ed program, but at Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama, my hometown, they have added a forensic science program that attracted kids that went into the teaching program rather than going to the forensic science program rather than going into teaching. So I think the state going to have, I know they're going to have to step up to do something innovative and creative in terms of filling some of these gaps that are going to come up.
Related to the question I asked earlier about the teachers that remain here, and you talked about the like the mentor program, providing them an opportunity for leadership. How else do we get information from our teachers that remain about how they can feel supported? So I like that is like a professional opportunity. I would imagine that, you know, based on what's been shared, that there are other elements in addition. So it sounds like that's good, but like that lack of support, maybe even like personal health. And I know you all read the responses, so you know where these things may fall. And I guess I'm just asking, it tends to be a theme, like when I speak with teachers, actually not just here, but when I've worked with other schools and when I'm in other districts, like how do we support you overall, like so professionally and otherwise? What do we have in place to get that information from our teachers?
We did a stay survey as well. So we have, we sent it out to people that chose to stay, and we asked them why, you know, and some other questions why they stayed, and we're, you know, trying to get that summarized because again, it was free text to let people choose what they wanted to say. So we're trying to gather that information to inform us as we go forward.
And I think too, by us being very intentional about visiting the schools beginning next week, that's giving them an opportunity to come down, ask questions about opportunities. We want to give them all the information or answer questions that they may have for new opportunities, or what are some other resources to support me with X, Y, and Z. And so we're just trying to make sure we have that material available. So if there's some SEL or social emotional support that you need, we want to make sure that we're providing that, but not over the phone or through an email, face to face. Just to make sure that they see and kind of feel that connection with human resources, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah,
let me. Really trying to change the interaction.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of follow up on that. You sent us a long article on U.S. schools struggling to hire and retain teachers, and since I'm retired, I could go to that was part 2. And I went ahead and read pieces of part 3, part 4, part 5. And one thing it talks about in part 5, it gets more into part 2. The article you sent us tells us the problems of recruitment. But parts 4 and 5 kind of talk about what school systems can do to address it, which is what you were saying. And they use the phrase professionalized teaching. Meaning that giving teachers, they obviously have to teach the standards, but giving teachers with a sense of of being involved in decision-making, and that's, that's just something that, having been a classroom teacher myself, it may have been difference to me, even more than the money oftentimes, because I felt like I was part of a solution that was being addressed by the school system.
Yeah, the teachers don't go into teaching for the money. They know that there's not money in it. So, yeah, we have a hard time competing with young people for jobs with the Metro Atlanta because they do pay, more than we do, and they have more to offer. But overall, there are other reasons people get into teaching, and it's, that's the connection that we have to make. We have to look different and better than others around us.
And getting to what Lakeisha was saying too, your biggest advertisement, and you all alluded to it, your biggest advertisement is your current teaching staff.
That's right.
And
right.
they can make you or break you.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And so.
Because who did they go to school with?
Right.
Other
Right.
teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when our teachers that are unhappy for whatever reason go on social media and just blast us, yeah, there you
So
go.
I almost wish there was some vehicle where we could kind of, almost like a balloon, kind of deflate it. When individual teachers get to that point that they want to spill over, that we somehow can address it and catch it earlier than get the consequences later when they, and bring down the.
And I remind our principals as often as I can, we have this employee assistance program for a reason, and y'all have committed to paying that, and it's a stressful job. It's stressful for administrators, it's stressful for teachers, it's stressful for everyone. I've met with a group of bus drivers this week. It's stressful. Working in the school district is stressful.
This is sort of indirectly related, but you just mentioned the employee assistance program. Years ago, I think it was through a particular organization. Considering the diversity that we have, the stressors of the environment, how do we make sure that teachers, not just teachers, drivers, parents, are able to access services that are representative of like their preferences? So for instance, they may want to work with an African American therapist, or they may want to work with a therapist that speaks Spanish as well. With the EAP and how that's set up, and I honestly haven't read it recently, but I know at one point it was a little bit limited in who they had access to.
Okay. Dawn, do you happen to know how the diversity looks over there right now?
No, I was just pulling up their website though.
I don't want to
there are people that are coming.
publicly,
Yeah, I don't want to put them on
curious
blast,
about.
right? But there are a couple people that come to mind, and they're not diverse. They can. The other beauty of working for the school district is we have really good insurance. So if they have our insurance, then they can go wherever they want, really. But I get what you're saying. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. But we try, I remind not just principals, but our directors, and then, people inevitably come to us too. And, we actually just today connected somebody with the AP that was just struggling. They had, stuff happens, life happens, inside and outside the classroom. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I suggested that. Dr. Ridley likes my football ticket up there.
I do too, and I'm not kidding. We've got Coach Smart's sister-in-law working next door, so maybe we can do something for her. I think they're a little bit of a hot commodity right now, though.
Maybe they can go for those 500 bleachers back there.
Maybe for us, just for us, right? They should.
That's right.
So I want to thank staff for sharing their candy. Is that some more? Just,
Yeah.
no more.
Ms. Duke,
Yes, sir.
do you mind projecting the next?
Which one first?
Calendar. Madam President, board members, as we transition to 6.3, this is a very preliminary draft of a calendar that would allow us to build the 2021 budget. We will start with a board retreat to allow the board to ask questions, to interface with our cabinet, and we would just want to capture your questions and get your perspective on the budget in general. We would be able to share our perspective as well. If you look at row 5, fiscal year 21, the actual budget calendar will be presented to the board at a business meeting, hopefully. What we would give you is the actual operational side of things, just so you know what is occurring. For example, Ms. Duke meets with all of our building principals to go over staffing, typically in February and March. That's not a governance issue, but you should be aware when that's happening, and we'll share this with you. You don't have to take photos of it. We'll share it with you before the end of the evening. But we want to give you a sense of what's happening. Byron and his team meets with every department to go over things. We just want to share with you the operational side of developing the budget. We would want to have another budget retreat in January to talk about our priorities and initiatives. Mr. Davis, believe me, we will have an initiative around increasing, I think it's really 3 components in HR. I used to work in HR. That's the running joke. I remind people in the office. But we want to increase more funds in recruitment, in the hiring, but also in the retention. So there's 3 areas that you always want to focus on. But there are a lot of different initiatives that I think our team would want to bring to the board. We would then go out to the community and share those priorities and initiatives with the community so it's not a surprise as we start building our fiscal 21 budget. And so we would do that in February. We would want to come back to you in March to give you some enrollment forecasting, share with you our preliminary staffing plan, and then also just give you some projections. We have tools where we can project what the QBE will be for our school system and what it means in terms of dollars and cents. In April, we'll have another board retreat. That's going to technically be more of a legislative update and to let you know what's happening with the actual development of the budget and what we are hearing, but also to allow you to start seeing some potential models for our fiscal 21 budget. And then the month of May would look like any other month of May that we've had, but please note all the different all the different activities that have happened before that time frame. May and June is very similar to what we've done in the past. That's a preliminary draft of what we would suggest. Our team looked at this for the last 2 weeks and we feel comfortable with its layout.
I like that. That's really helpful.
It is.
Ready for the next one, sir?
No.
No? Okay, sorry.
So that's all I have, Madam President, for my reports.
Thank you. And definitely thank you for the outline with the budget. I know that was something that has come up a lot. And I do understand it's preliminary. That's the only thing to change, may change, but I think it is really useful to have an idea of how we move over this within this school year. Consent agenda, wait. I am on 7. Thank you. Consent agenda and discussion.
I'm looking at 7.1 through 7.4. Should all those items be consent?
No.
I knew you were speaking of John. You scrutinize those minutes. Okay, go ahead.
But no, I'll move consent on 7.1.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
For 7.1 consent.
Okay.
For 7.2. In the minutes, approval of West Broad renovation. It stated that John Knox shared his view on previous proposals for this project. And my intent, and I think my words, I've got them here, were to speak just on the West Broad proposal that was brought to us. So I don't think that's factual. Unless previous proposals means previous versions of the same proposal. I did go through that.
Is there a request, is there a request that you have?
Yes, so I would say John Knox shared his view on the proposal.
Is that something that can be?
Actually,
Okay, so with that modification, would it remain? Any other thoughts about 7.1, 7.2? Okay, moving.
So 7.29 is consent, John?
Yes.
All right.
With those changes. All right, so next. 7.3.
consent?
Yeah. Okay. 7.4.
Consent.
What about our field trip, 7.5?
Consent.
Our action to approve the cancellation of the village property, 7.6.
Madam President, if I may. I think we have acknowledged earlier this evening that the governance culture is awkward right now and intense. I can tell you, in all my years as a superintendent, I've never put a recommendation on an agenda that I don't believe in. This is the first one. Based on the environment from the call meeting on September 26th, I felt that this was the direction the board wanted to go in. And Ms. Duke, if you don't mind, I'll take you up on the offer of projecting. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback or whatever form of the conversation that took place last week regarding this property. I think there's just a few things I would want you to know, and the public to know. The first is this discussion around 394 millage has been taking place with the board, mainly in executive session since May. And so I think it was implied that there were new elements or there were new components to the proposal. That's not actually true. The district has been looking for a district office of some sort since 2018, and the locations have varied. And I think I mentioned this last week. We've gone from looking at a large area, I think it's the former Macy's at the mall, to looking at the former building that's referenced as, or was the Hobby Lobby building. We obviously looked at the Georgia Power building. We've been on the search for a district office for quite some time. It was also mentioned that the district has been moving back and forth in regards to the actual square footage that's necessary for a facility. Please note that anytime you do a space utilization study, things will continue to grow. We've been presenting to you pre-existing facilities with the concept of we will try to make it fit. We will try to make it fit. So I think we shared here earlier, here's our current usage of square footage. here at H.T. Edwards and also at Whitehead Annex. That's not ideal. And if we were doing a space utilization study, it would be larger. But these were the confines that we were given. Please note that when you start discussing building or constructing a facility, the possibility of it growing from what we are presenting with the millage facility is strong. There's a significant impact on the Career Academy. If we don't make a decision soon in regards to where to go with a district office, it will start having, I believe, an adverse impact on the Career Academy. Mr. Harris and the Career Academy Board have done a good job in working around the district office situation, but I am concerned that we are adversely impacting the Career Academy. There are business partners in this community who are prepared to partner with the Career Academy to expand opportunities if at some point there is a facility that is dedicated to the Career Academy services. There was a comment made that we should have an appraisal of the facility. And the owners of the facility have contacted the district this week and said, if you need an additional 30 days of due diligence, we will provide it for you. We believe that extra 30 days would allow us to obtain that appraisal if the board needs that appraisal. We also believe that if you move forward with the architectural services on next week Thursday's meeting, October 10th, that will give us some time to work with an architectural firm to refine the number that we have presented for renovations. Those numbers were a hard guess. We're not quite sure what they would be, and we would never know until we had a chance to work with an architectural firm. We still believe that this facility would meet our needs. But if you continue to feel that it's not the right facility, please know that we understand. But at some point, we'll need a district office. We can't continue to kick this can down the road. And so what I've tried to lay out here is you can go to option B. I think I've even shared with the board when we were in one of our sessions that if this is the direction the board wants to go and build a new district office, that's great. That's fantastic if that's what you want to do. I would just caution you that this 40,000 square feet may grow as we start doing space utilization. And when you have the concept of you can build versus having to fit into an existing facility, that tends to grow. And so that number of $8 to $9 million may creep up to $10, $11 million, and then you may eventually be in the same position that we're in terms of a financial situation as we are with millage. It also takes away, and there's some advantages here that we tried to point out. We give access to this facility to the Career Academy. The facility on millage has the number of offices we're looking for, the proximity to neighboring schools, not only Clarke Central, but to Barrow, Alps, Clarke Middle, Chase, is really, I think, advantageous. The cost right now is a disadvantage, we believe. And we understand that and accept it. And so we're asking if you could give us and think about potentially this extra 30 days of due diligence, that could be very helpful to us. But if not, we are going back to this remaining SPLOST 5 projects. If you go back to the SPLOST 5 ballot, it clearly states that some type of administrative office facility would be in SPLOST 5. And so we do believe that we can and should move forward with this work. So if you eliminate option A, we understand. I just want to make sure that this evening we're laying out all the options, because then we're gonna transition to option B with the idea, and this is an aggressive timeline of having it built by January of 2021, but we would then have to make a transition to option B. Option C, I just want the board and the community to know we're then putting the Career Academy in jeopardy. We're hurting the Career Academy. We're also hurting, I believe, in the same vein as the Career Academy, we're hurting Whitehead Elementary School. Whitehead Elementary School is, I believe, our third largest school in terms of population, but behind our two comprehensive high schools. That school would love to have the annex to use for their kindergarten services. So again, if option A is not available, we understand. We get it. We're going to make the transition and pivot to option B. If option B is declined by the board, then we'll go to option C. But I want you to know, as a board and the community to know, that we're continuing to jeopardize not only Whitehead, but also the Career Academy. But I don't think it's a bad thing to say that we're also jeopardizing the overall operations of the school system. So the inability of our chief academic officer to not walk down the hallway and talk to our executive director of special education does have an impact on children. I think that was a part of the conversation that happened last week. My inability to not walk down the hallway and talk to Byron and the financial team has a significant impact on what we do. And so it may look like you're building offices for administrative staff. That's not what you're doing. You're creating a space for the efficient operation of our school system. And when people are unable to talk, it's in some cases it actually puts children in jeopardy. And so if you need to have the motivation of helping the Career Academy to move on either option A or B, that's fine. Hold on to the Career Academy. If Whitehead Road is your motivator, that's fine. For us, it's those two plus us being more efficient. Poor Byron, for example, had to move from the superintendent conference room to my office to working out in the hallway here of the Career Academy just today to work with some of our staff members around career, technical, and agricultural education budgeting. Our CFO shouldn't have to operate that way. That's a condition of us not having a district office. So I just wanted to share with you, last week Thursday, and the environment of last week Thursday was not the opportunity for me to say some of these additional comments. And I didn't have the additional information of the owner's willingness to extend the due diligence period to allow us to get that appraisal and to do some other work of really narrowing down that renovation cost. But I wanted to share with you that I still believe option A is a strong option. But again, if you decide that option A is not where you want to be, despite where we believe the advantages are, we're going to make the pivot, the hard pivot, immediately to option B, because we have to move forward with the district office. We can't continue to kick this can down the road. And I would just say the caveat is, please do not hold us to it being at 40,000 square feet. Once architects get into the mix, they start doing space utilization, they're going to say, well, if you're building from scratch, why don't you go to 50,000 square feet? Why don't you go to 60,000 square feet? And then this price may increase. And if it increases, we may be at a point of, at a price range that we're saying the millage building costs or even more. There's just a couple other additional options and thoughts I want to share before you make your decision around a consent agenda item.
Dr. Means, you mentioned, I think it was last week, or whenever you mentioned it, I think it was pertaining to Megatronics, some money that we would lose if we didn't do something in a timeline. Do you have approximate amount that we would lose?
I don't know the amount. I am aware that there are manufacturers and manufacturing operations in town who would like to see us build out a lab here at HT at Works as soon as possible.
Okay.
If I could just clarify, your idea that we could end up at $11 million, but we would have a much bigger building that would be designed for its use. Is that correct? So,
Potentially, yes.
yeah. If the price does go to that high, at least we'll have almost twice as big a building and designed for your use. And can we? So did I understand what you said about the not being able to communicate with each other? That's the 8,000 square feet Whitehead of those people that you'd like to pull in, but you can't pull them into millage. Is
Yes,
that
we
correct?
can.
Because it's,
We can pull them in millage.
how do you?
There's enough office spaces where we can bring our team from Whitehead Annex and the team that's located here at HCF Works in the same facility.
But you would be downsizing from 45,000 square feet to 37.
I mean, can I speak on?
Please.
Right now, the Millage property, there's 141 offices in that particular space right now. We need, based on the space utilization that we've done for our staff, we need anywhere between 108 to 118 offices, depending on where we want to go. So,
Okay,
so there's enough offices there to house our team.
So what I'm presenting to the board, Madam President and board members, is that with this new revelation that the owners are willing to extend the due diligence by another 30 days, it allows us to capture the appraisal that some people have requested. It also allows us, if you approve the architectural firm, to work with an architectural firm to refine those renovation costs, so we have a better handle on the number.
Yeah, Dr. Means, if you can go to that, you got the clicker right there.
Yes, sir.
You can go to the 1A, options A, B, C.
Yes.
Okay. And again, I know I'm out of my depth, but I mean, when I look at what Hillsman cost, and divide that by the square footage, I end up with like 160. And like I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm just doing simple math, and so those numbers seem high to me. I still go with option B myself,
okay.
But those numbers do seem high to me.
Those numbers are total. That's total project costs, right? So it includes construction, it includes architectural fees, it includes FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. It includes everything.
Okay, thank you for saying that, because that's what I think was kind of the missing piece when we compared what the square footage, because you had a previous slide that showed what the square footage of the millage property would be, and that I don't think that included the furnishings, based on the simple math that I used.
We would probably have. So the millage building, we're going bare bones. We would use the office furniture we're using now in many cases. You build a brand new facility, there will be extra and new conference rooms, for example. That means there's new conference tables. When you build brand new, there's gonna be shiny new things that will go along with that construction.
But this will be the 21st century office of the Clarke County School District.
Sounds exciting. Yes, it would be.
Okay. And I do apologize because I feel like that you have been very diligent about looking for different properties out there, and I do, having been on the property committee, you know, just kind of like absorbing what you were trying to do since May and not giving you feedback, then, you know, I fault myself. So I'll say that right up front.
We didn't know that there was an option to build a brand new district office. We never knew that that was an option. If that's where we are, we option A was in our effort to be prudent and frugal. If you're suggesting that option B, building a brand new district office, is available to us, I would just say the caveat is, I can't promise that Mr. Gilbert and his team are going to stop at 40,000 square feet. That's where a space utilization study comes into play, right? Because a contractor is going to say, okay, if you're building brand new, what's your needs? When you're buying an existing facility, you fit in whatever that facility is shaped at and built up.
Just to piggyback off of Greg, so the cost for furnishing, it wouldn't be much with option A because we use existing. Were there architect fees included in the option A cost, the 11?
That's part of that renovation number.
Oh, that's built in?
4.3.
We had to build it in that way, yes.
Okay, so
I don't know where there it is.
So it's in the
We would have
purchase price? Or?
No, sir. It's built into that renovation cost.
Oh, okay.
4.3.
Yes.
Okay.
In the new construction, I guess my question is, as I recall, the reason we were doing the existing facility was the request from the county was, what can you do, Clarke County School District, to help us revitalize this corridor? And so that's where the district office renovation project came from. If we do new construction for the district office, are we covered?
Covered in terms of what?
In terms of the commitment that we made in SPLOST. It was just district office, it didn't say build or.
It did not say.
And so where did the concept of new come from? I mean, I'm fine with it, but I'm just curious.
It actually came up during one of our executive session
So
in property committee. And so, again, so I appreciate you kind of pulling that out. I want to be very clear, if option A is no longer an option,
Right.
we still have to do something with a district office.
Right.
And so then that's when we move to option B.
And so new construction is, we don't have to do anything to vote on new construction until we.
You would have to.
Up or
You
down
would-
that thing, okay.
But we would bring it to you as soon as November. If you said, no, we don't want to buy, we are clear, we don't want millage, despite some of the other pieces I've shared with you this evening, if that's what you're saying, then we will make a turnaround, and next month, we're bringing to you a proposal to build a district office.
So with option B,
Yes.
because I'm not, you know, I've expressed, I think in one of our previous executive sessions about my reservations. But I have reservations about B too, so I don't know if that puts me to C or D or E or whatever, but like, because with the Gaines campus, that is 12 acres or 13 acres, right? If the ultimate goal is to create a space where children can like develop, they have access to resources and be it more classrooms or whatever it may be, I'm just trying to figure out in my head, how does that still fit with the district office being there? Now, I know it's still larger, right? So 13 acres is different than the acreage that we have in option A. But I guess, part of me feels that it limits the capacity that we could build there to really reach out, to reach the surrounding communities. So we've also talked about, and this is up in the air, we don't know if, first, we don't know if SPLOST will pass, and then even if it passes, we don't know exactly where the library will be and when the building will take place. But I guess in my head, I sort of see that campus as being a place really where our East Side families have a place to develop and access to books and youth programs and whatever else that campus could be. And so I'm just trying to figure out, how does this limit those options?
It limits those options. Mr. Davis has appropriately, I think, pointed out that there is an amazing, I believe, transformational program called 3DE through Junior Achievement, where you can work with children in a different way. The partner program with 3DE is BizTown. And I think I've mentioned publicly before, there's a local business that's willing, has communicated to Junior Achievement that they're willing to donate up to $4 million in the creation of a BizTown for our kids in this community. That's significant. We would, the vision is all in the November 2018 Future Facilities report. Our vision was to make the old Gaines site that space for that type of work. If you place a district office there, it clearly limits things. I think the other, and Mr. Fisher, you would have to tell me, but there's a earth shelter of some sort. There's a shell at the old Gaines site. So the facility, the plant, the footprint, while it's 13 acres, it's a unique 13 acres. And once you start building a facility and we've made a commitment to put a boys and girls club there and you have parking spaces, there's not much else you can do there. So yes, that's a long way of saying it will limit options for children at that site.
And can you remind me, just for the record, and I honestly don't remember, and so I'll blame it on that and the fact that this is my first year. Why couldn't the district office be at the West Broad site? I know we're not talking about that, but in my head, I'm just trying to figure out, like, early learning here, going back to a little bit of what we're talking about.
Ted Gilbert made sure that I connected with our architects. I would say within my first 60 days on the job, to say, so here's the reason why a district office on West Broad would never work. And the main reason was parking. And there was a conversation of having to use a parking deck on that facility, which is a very expensive model. That was the main concern.
In answer to your, because I mean, one thing that was in the facilities report was a picture of a layout of old Gaines property. And I don't know who drew it, but they had
Not me.
Not you. They had early learning there, they had BizTown, they had Boys and Girls Club, and then they didn't even touch the current building that's there now, the old Gaines building. Now, whether or not that was drawn to scale, I don't know. But I feel like that we're, you know, without looking at, again, without hiring an architect who I guess would also place where certain buildings could go in that area. I mean, we want that area in the east side. We want it to be for children. But there's enough land, which I think, and of course, you know, I'm not an architect, and but I feel like there's enough land there. When I talk to the county, they're talking about a library, possibly 20,000 square feet, 2 floors, so it's 10,000 square feet per floor. Yeah, it's going to be small. I was kind of disappointed in that. First he said 30, and then he said 20. But the footprint is 1/3 of an acre. You know, the actual building itself. And then, of course, you've got to beautify it, and they're talking about needing 72 parking spaces. But one thing I found out is that, you know, when you figure parking spaces, you don't simply say, well, 72 here, the district needs 125, so you add those two together, because that's not the way that they figure parking, like in the mall area or something. And that's the extent of my knowledge. But you know, I would hate for us to jump at something when we haven't put the people in place who could tell us for sure what fits and what doesn't fit. And so that's where I'm at. And I understand that with the need to act quickly. And that's why I don't feel like dragging. That's why I voted last week to go ahead and let's get done with it and move on to
option B.
To option B.
A new one.
But anyway,
a new district office.
But Dr. Means explained that tract of land, James, it's a unique tract of land. You don't have that much width. But lengthwise, all that we're talking about, and I'm not an architect, but I've been around architectural kinds of things. It was my dad in construction building, putting flooring in. All that we've talked about, it is not going to fit, folks.
Dr. Knox?
I think, number one, since we're talking about the consent agenda, I don't think this is a consent item. I'm just going to go out on a limb there. But I will say that I think that option B is the best compromise because option A, I've already talked about. Option C is not legitimate because it does impact the students in the Career Academy. And I think that what we need to do is find the best compromise that gets us out of this building so that Career Academy can expand as it needs to, as already needed to. And I think that this will give us the opportunity to have the district offices with room to grow. That was a question I had asked the realtor. And I said, so how much room do we have to grow? Not that I'm a big fan of administrative growth, but it happens. And it sounds like we're kind of shoehorning things into South Village if the estimate is 44,000 or so. So anyway, I just, in the interests of disclosure, I think option B makes a lot of sense, but this is not for consent.
That's where I wanted to be. So if it's not for consent, are we going to discuss this again? Are we going to take a vote on this next week?
I think
are we going to change this? Where are we going?
So I think it is a consent agenda technically. If there's a will of the board where you're shifting away from option A and you're either at option B or C, then legally we need to make a decision on the contract and cancel it. And so we've tried to cover all of our bases with this item. And so if there's enough will on the board to say no, we want to continue to look at option A. And this evening, hopefully the information that I've shared, that the owners are willing to extend the due diligence period by 30 days. If there's a majority of the board that's saying we want to give this an extra 30 days to look at it, then you're right, Dr. Knotts, this is not a consent agenda. If there isn't, and the majority of the board is leaning towards option B or C, then I would encourage you legally to cancel the contract so we can get that canceled contract to the owners, and then you're not buying a building that you don't want.
So where are you all? Consent?
I think again, I like the 30 days. Can I speak? Trying to get it right this time. So I would like to see us at least take that 30 days. I want to see that appraisal because it may come in lower than we expect, right? Because I think if they're basing it on what may happen in that corridor, then yeah, we could be dealing with what's really sitting up there on the tax records in terms of the value of that property. And so that would be lower. And so again, until we have the information and guidance, I would think we shouldn't make speculations about either. I think we just need more.
And so I think if I'm hearing you correctly, that means that this does not need to be consent then. If there's one, generally consent requires a consensus of the board.
That isn't really exactly
But the
what you
consent
said.
is to cancel the contract. If we're going to extend it for 30 days, that's a new motion, I would think, or a new recommendation.
I think the agenda item stays on your agenda and can be consent if the majority of the board is saying we are in agreement of option B or C. If there's enough of you who are considering option A, still with this additional information, then you should pull it off of consent. And it gives you at least another week to deliberate among yourselves. You may get to this point and say, no, I've thought about it. Thanks for the offer, the extra 30 days. Thanks for the architectural review. We want to go to option B. Ultimately, this comes down to the board needing to make a decision. I think one part of last week, Thursday, I just want to clarify, while I believe option A is our strongest option, my overall goal is for us to have a district office. And so if you select option A, we believe that's the best choice. But as a governing board, you have to make a decision. And if it's going to be B or C, you need to let us know what it's going to be for our planning purposes.
And, oh, go ahead.
I just don't believe we should be rushed into a B or a C. Like, this overwhelms me with this kind of planning all the time. You either do this or you do that. I just think that's not a fair way to do business. I believe that the consent states that the action is to approve the cancellation of the purchase, and we should make a decision on that. Maybe go back to property committee and talk about B or C or any other options down the road. But this kind of carrying on, it is very overwhelming. This is not a little bit of money we're talking about. We need to. I want us to stay focused on what is on this agenda right here, 7.6.
And so, go ahead, Ms. Davis.
Since all of us have the option to pull something off of consent, it is off of consent already, right? So that's done. So it's going to require
So you're pulling it off?
You want to pull it off?
I'm taking it off of consent.
Yep.
Please understand the timeline. Yep. You need to make a decision. You have, from a governing perspective, it may be overwhelming, but part of the job of a board member is to make difficult decisions. And so you have a legal obligation to decide if you're going to cancel the contract by next week, Thursday, or you have purchased the building on 394 South Middle.
Yeah, and I think that's not what you were saying. You were saying you want to vote on this next week, but then you want some time to talk about.
Since we're going that way, we can vote on it next week, but vote next week, move forward, and then talk about whatever else, but not miss.
It will come in November.
That's fine, but not with this discussion right now.
Yeah, I think right now, the only decision for this particular consent item was whether we cancel the contract or not.
Yes.
Whether it's on consent or not.
We're still going to vote on it.
Right, whether we vote on it as a group or,
Yeah.
what I understand is that it's an individual vote right now.
That's all.
Okay.
And do keep in mind, it could stay on the consent agenda tonight, and someone would change their mind and said, okay, at the beginning of the meeting next week, before the agenda is adopted, pull it off.
Madam President, board members, when we get to the board meeting next week, I have nothing else to add. I mean, ultimately, this will be a board decision at this point. And I've tried to lay out all the different options, and so you have to make a decision. Okay.
All right. So is it all phone?
It's off.
Good.
Before we leave, though, for my clarification, Ms. Davis, the part that you mentioned about the extra 30 days, where does any of that fit in here? Because we had to make the decision about whether this was off consent or on consent, and either way we vote on it.
I think that he has to present that when we get to this item. He has to present that as the option, or amend. The agenda says to cancel the contract.
That's right.
Or you have to add another caveat to that, or change that to say, consider approving the 30-day or vote for a 30-day extension. So it has to be before
Or after we vote to cancel.
Or to cancel, right? So there are three options.
So it would be some type of amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm saying yes, I think I'm right.
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it's off of the consent agenda, which means we'll vote on it.
Well, it'll be separate, it won't be
Separate.
consent, it'll be
Right.
separate.
Okay. Any Other thoughts before we move on?
No.
Okay, all right. 7.7.
Consent.
7.8.
Consent.
So I just, we did, last year we applied for the grant, we got it.
Yes.
So that's, does it cover?
Dr. Pope?
Sorry, you thought you were gonna miss it.
Yes, sir.
So is it gonna cover, what schools will be covered in the, all 4 middle schools?
Yes, this
Okay.
is the final year for the middle school grant, so it's the 5th year.
And what about elementary?
Elementary, this is the first year of the new grant for that one, so it covers, it serves all 14 elementary schools, but we house them at both Boys and Girls Club locations.
Okay. And how many youngsters are included in that elementary school?
250, 125 per site,
Okay, and then for the middle?
180, 45 at each middle school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions around that? What are we at, 7.9?
I want to take that off.
Okay, we'll take that off of consent. All right.
Is there any reason why it's being taken off?
I would like for us to vote on it, and I think I explained it in my email today. We went back and forth today.
What was in your email?
But as I shared with you and the board, this came up before. This is the action to approve architectural services contract.
Yes.
And as I explained the first time this came through, that I'm very concerned about a multi-year contract with anybody when we have not gone back, as was stated the first time around. We were to go back and look at ways that we could incorporate where local minorities and local contractors could be added to the equation somehow, because I'm very concerned about that.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome.
So that's off of consent.
Off of consent. And so then in our discussion around that, I guess my question would be, do you have some recommendations for how you want that to go forward? Because we can't do any construction work without hiring the architect. We can't do any building selection or anything. So is there something else we need to talk about that needs to be in its place?
I think I heard her say the length of the contract was the main concern.
Yeah, the length of the contract.
Is it a 5-year contract?
No, it's a multi-project contract.
Right, no, it's
I
not.
thought I read
Our next 4
multi-year.
or 5 projects, we're selecting this firm.
So I have a question. When we did talk about this previously, that was to retain an architecture firm on retainer for whatever.
That was for 5 years.
And then this one is different because this is for specific projects that have been
Right.
identified.
Yes.
Dan, I think there was.
I know, I saw
time-
something else on there. I would like to look this over again and think about it.
There was a
We've got the
time,
guys here, so let's make sure we talk about it.
there was a time too, and, remind me, I hope it's not executive session stuff, but somewhere we talked about how this impacted policy, right? Policy, RFPs, there was some in some conversation that we had.
That was an executive session, we better leave that alone.
Okay.
There was, okay.
Yeah, that's why I was there and saying.
So it wasn't policy that we discussed it, John? It wasn't policy, it was okay.
I would just add that from a traditional governance model, if the board would like administration to pursue certain actions, that's typically where that work begins and ends. And then we work with legal counsel, we look at our processes to see if it's even possible to create language to encourage minority vendors to apply for jobs. I think legal counsel would have, as I wrote in my email response, I have some concerns with the content and the language that we're using around this issue, just from a legal perspective. And so I want to defer to Mike, and he's already weighed in, I believe, on some of his concerns, and how we can thread the needle, but it would be close. And so if we need to, and that's administrative work, and so that's why Mr. Pruitt and our team have been working on it we think we can create a way and a pathway for RFPs to consider other options, but please know how I just said that. We need to be very careful with our language and what we are saying and what we're trying to do, and that should not cloud our votes for services that we need to do the work of the district.
I'm not trying to hinder services. We had this discussion before. We were stated that we were supposed to, what was it called, Mike?
Disparity study.
Disparity study. That happened months ago. I'm not trying to do the work of your office or anybody's office. I am trying to make sure that we follow through on what we have agreed to as a board. It was agreed that we would get that study done, and that we would, once that study got done, then we would begin to look at ways that RFP could be written. And so it's been two processes, where one with the real estate, now we're here with this, brought to us again, and it hasn't been done. So I'm not trying to do your work or anybody else's work.
Sure.
So this intimidation, this bullying, it has to stop.
No, ma'am.
Yes, that's exactly what it is, and I'm gonna call it out.
Oh, okay.
I'm calling it out.
Okay.
So I am going to,
It's ridiculous.
I'm
Yes,
gonna
ma'am.
try to get us back focused. I do remember the study, us talking
Yes.
about that in some capacity. So I don't think the content of this conversation or the emails are out of the blue. This has been something that we talked about. And also, I think when we had a retreat maybe a while ago. Maybe it wasn't a retreat. It was when we first got here, and we were in here.
January.
We didn't do a retreat.
Yeah.
No, we did.
It was in January.
Okay. We all
Yes.
sort of, one of the questions was like, what are the things you value, what things are important to you? And that was another time, if I'm not mistaken, that like equity and from the perspective of really looking at that process came up as well.
Sure.
And so, I hear both of you all, and I hope that we all agree that it's important. It's just that we are trying to figure out like what's next. So like what is the next set of information? Like what information do we have now? And I understand what you're saying.
Right,
we have to
exactly.
operate within the law, of course. But in essence, we're following up to see where we are.
No doubt, and we can provide and will provide the study when it's completed. But that shouldn't pause us from voting on the architectural services that are before you this evening. That shouldn't stop that vote. I mean, if you're waiting on the study, once you can get the study now, you can get the study in 2 months, you still have to do the work of the board. And we're stating to you that, I think we brought this to the board in February. We're bringing it back because we have a need. And this kind of goes along with the district office conversation. The longer we kick the can down the road, the more the work gets behind for the school system. So I think that getting the study and voting on this action item are two totally different items. And not devaluing getting that study, but that shouldn't prevent you from voting on if the district can pursue and retain architectural services. That shouldn't stop that process.
Well, one of the things I hear, I think, because there is room when we talk about what's on consent and what's not, that is sort of the freedom or within the autonomy of the board member to decide like what issue is most salient for them as we consider strategic plans, what the things that you've shared and the things that we've requested. And so I don't think I hear that we're trying to, or Dr. Maddox is not trying to do the work. It's just that the work might be different. The work to her may mean I need more information before I make this vote.
And she said she needed more time.
But she won't have that information by next week Thursday. So
Sure.
the study won't be here next week Thursday, right? So the real issue is, so if the statement is I need that disparity study to decide if I'm going to select an architectural firm or not, I don't see that study. I'm not aware of it. I mean, maybe Ms. Jackson has the study completed, but maybe not. I don't know. if the study is completed, we'll get it out to you as soon as possible. But voting on architectural services is separate from reviewing that study. That's a higher level governance conversation to say, so what else do we need to do? My concern administratively is that the purpose of a work session is for us to have these conversations to decide if an item is going to be a consent agenda item or not. And in rare instances, you can pull an item off of consent because the board needs to discuss things a little bit more. But if it's being pulled off because information is required or there's a different lens that people want to look at, I don't know if I can help or our team can help board members with that between now and next week Thursday. And so if that's the case, then we should probably just pull this off the agenda altogether and not vote on it.
Can I ask a question about the?
Dr. Dyckman.
So I get those reasons for pulling something off consent. I guess I also thought that one reason to pull something off consent was maybe if a person wanted to vote yes on everything else but no on one item, and so they didn't want to have it be that they were voting no on everything else. Like, is that a reason to take something off?
It is if it's articulated that way.
Yeah, I just wanted point of information with regard to the timing, and just because I want to look this up. May I ask Mike a question? The disparity study message that you sent to us, do you remember when that was, so I can dig it up?
No, I mean, it's been months, so I'd have to look.
Okay. I'd just like to have that from you.
Oh, it was it April?
It was April.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
We've been down this road before, and we researched it to see could we do set-asides, because we brought to the table that, you know, in private corporations, if they take federal monies, there was a clause at one time where they had to have like a 15% set aside, or they had to have subcontractors, minority contractors, and in my work as a small business owner, I did a lot of research around that and went to a few seminars around that to see how those contracts work. And so, you know, most of the time in small business and being new to business, we were trying to get a bigger company to partner with us. And so I was looking for that kind of stuff. So we've had this research done.
So let me just go, I don't know what's been shared with the full board and not. I did a long memo that went to Mr. Hamill when he was here.
That's right.
About how these things work, and it's different in different contexts, but when we're talking about local government, including school districts, then there's a process you have to go through, and your next step in that would be contracting a qualified firm to do this disparity study that would show whether or not there's a history of discrimination in Clarke County that the school district has been an active participant in. If it finds that, then you can do minority preferences within the guidelines that law has established.
Okay, awesome. So I was saying, yeah,
The study
we
itself.
haven't hired.
I think so.
That was what we left off with us getting that study done, and then we haven't heard anything else.
Getting the study done
Yeah.
by a firm or by Mr. Pruitt?
No.
By a firm.
There are experts who do this. There are a
Okay.
handful of them. You can look at some of the cities and counties and school boards that have done this. Some of them have their disparity study posted.
And so that would have to be an action item, I would imagine.
Well, if it's under $80,000, the superintendent could contract it, I suppose.
And that was the information in your April
Yes.
message? Good. Do you remember what day?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know that. I know I did first a long letter that went just to Mr. Hamill administration.
I think I saw it, though.
You may have, it was also discussed at policy committee, so it may have been circulated to everybody at some point.
It was.
It was written April the 5th, 2019.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, but Dr. Thomas said she knows where it was, but I don't think I have it.
Well, what I was going to say is that when this came up before, I voted against it. I've changed, and for one reason, not that it's gonna minimize, the discussion that we're having. But what we're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about design. So we're not talking about breaking ground. I mean, when we, am I correct? That, I mean, in terms of architectural services, it's the design piece. It's not sticking a shovel in the ground. It's not pouring concrete. It's not putting a roof on. And that's where whenever we talked about the disparity study, that's when I thought that would come into play. I am disappointed that we haven't pursued it, because if we go ahead and hire an architectural firm, obviously they're going to design that we're going to approve, and then we're going to hit the shovel and start digging holes. And right, and that's when
That's what I'm talking about.
that's when I think the disparity study comes into play. And so hopefully, when we're at that point, which is not that far away, that we know what we're talking about, and so we can begin to address with issues that Tawana's raising. I don't think it's with the architectural firm, and so that's all I'm going to say. I mean, so I'm going to support this, because but not to take away from what others are saying.
And we dropped the ball in not following up to make sure that we had asked for the study and that the study was done. So let's lay that on our shoulders.
I have asked for it. We didn't drop the ball. No, I've asked for it since then.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did not drop the ball.
I've dropped the ball.
It takes a vote of the board, because one person doesn't have the authority, so we need to have the board make a vote on doing that work. That's what I mean by dropping the ball.
Okay, so that would be, well, okay. As it relates to this is off of the consent agenda.
For an individual vote.
For an individual vote.
Right.
But what I also hear at some point, I don't know, maybe you all can guide me, that the study, what is it called again? The disparity study would need to make it to an agenda.
Or is it something that, would you propose that next week?
Well, we would have to engage the firms and see how much the fee would be. If it's under $80,000, we would commence immediately.
Maybe between now and next Thursday we can.
I can provide a written update when I have one.
But again, I think the simple thing is to either modify the motion to ask that it be done, right? For the board to approve that it be done.
No.
No.
He's got it proposed.
Pending costs.
He's got it proposed.
Can't do it. Let's go.
And so I think what I hear you saying is that you'll engage the firms.
Sure.
And,
yes, ma'am.
And that at some point that
I'll give you a written update at some point. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right.
That was easy.
And might I go a little bit further? When do you anticipate that some point would be? Given what we have on our
within the
agenda?
next month. That was a Mr. Davis question.
Okay.
What a time frame.
Right. All right. So that is off of the consent agenda, is that correct?
So,
right.
and then just not to belabor this, but that was the purpose of my line of questioning of saying, so the study won't be done. So I don't know how that impacts this action item. You can't tie the two together. I mean, it's.
I had questions about us moving on with this millage. I didn't say a word. If I have the right, I don't have anything else to add. That's what I want to happen.
Yeah, that's just.
I have the right. She had the right to say we're gonna pull millage off of the consent. I didn't agree with it, but I'm like, that's what we're gonna do. I'm with it.
That's all.
And it's fine.
It's okay.
Okay.
And I would think the disparity study really has implications for.
It has implications for all of our work, but it was presented this evening as a barrier of voting on this action item. That's
I did
my
not
only
do that.
point.
That's-
But
that's
I don't
the
want to
kind of
belabor this
stuff I'm talking about.
issue
This is
at
the
all.
kind of stuff that I'm talking about.
So it gets back to our whole conversation that we've had, right, about we don't know how to get questions asked and answered. So I mean, it's not gonna go away because we said we have that problem. It's not gonna go away until we work it out. And so, can we move on?
Yes,
Thank you.
okay. Where are we?
We're on 710.
Last one.
Governance training.
Oh. Let me do it first.
And so, Madam President, board members, it's the items that Mr. Davis and Dr. Knotts mentioned earlier. We have an obligation of having 9 hours of training, governance training provided for the board. You've already have 3 logged as a result of the retreat. So we only need 6 more. And I think based on the agenda that we've identified with having GSBA work with us in reviewing our B policies, completing the review of the effective standards of governance of a Georgia school system, and also working on board norms, I think those 3 items, we will clearly meet the 6-hour requirement.
And that 6 hour is for the calendar year or the school?
Fiscal year.
Fiscal year.
Fiscal.
So the
Okay.
school year.
All right.
So you already have a third of your requirement done as a result of the retreat.
I have my 9 hours.
So are you
Okay,
gonna
Mr.
come
Worthy.
in?
But, oh no, I'll be here. But seriously, I did,
That's
6
right, you
hours
went
at
to the-
UGA.
you went to the
Okay, and then I did 3, but no, I'll be here.
Dr. Knox and then Dr. Matthews.
Excuse me. Yeah, my question was, is this called whole board governance training that we'll be doing? Is that the name for this? Or is
I
this-
don't know what the name of it. It comes from the Department of Education. They require us to have.
Is that one of
the
the
9 hours.
requirements? John, is that what-
Yeah, 3 hours have to be the whole board training. which
Is there a
we
reason
had
for the
with
question,
GSBA.
Dr. Knox?
Yeah.
I was trying to find the name. I didn't know if there was a name for this.
You're correct.
Or we just check off hours. It's the hours are the important thing.
The hours is the important thing, but also the plan is a requirement for the Department of Education for the school system to submit a plan, and then also logged hours. So if you remember last fiscal year, you logged your hours as a result of our charter system review, and that's how you met that requirement.
And the new board members, 15 hours.
But they will attend the new board member
I
orientation, that clicks off a lot of hours. Yep.
So last year we did
The charter system. That was with Sherry Gibney Sherman and Russ Cook.
I guess they're long. I just want to know where do we find our hours? Where do we find that information?
I'll have all that.
Okay.
And like you'll let us, although it doesn't sound like we'll be in this situation this year, but if we're ever
Short.
over the next 3 years
I've
short.
already registered Dr. Berry and Dr. Yeager for their new board training, because they have to have different training than the rest of you.
And so remember, you know, he is our board secretary, so he keeps up with everything. Just pass it over extra. And then Lisa Kippis.
So with the plan here though, do we have to tell them exactly the dates and like, it doesn't have to be.
We don't have to
that
have the dates, we
specific.
need to have a plan. Yes.
Which is just what you described earlier.
Okay. Personnel, well, that's all consent, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Personnel next week.
Personnel, okay.
As stated, Ms. Duke and Mr. Harris and their team have done a good job. We have 13.5 vacancies in the organization right now, of which 5 are special education vacancies. 1 is a high school Spanish teacher, which is difficult to find. So we feel like we're in a good place, but with a district our size, there's an ebb and flow of that number, but we're feeling good about our situation.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah, this is a question in code. You know, we got growth in the school district, and growth triggers the need for maybe an additional administrative position at a school. And if there's another school that is also experiencing a lot of growth with that, are they pretty much level in terms of, when they reach a certain number of students, that it may trigger a second administrative position?
The criteria is very unique. It's not only student enrollment, but it's also certain social emotional components. It could be violations of the code of conduct. There's a lot of different factors that come into play. Ultimately, it comes down to Byron and Lynn being able to say, do we have the funds to afford it? And do we think we have a pool of candidates that will fill the position? So once the criteria is identified in terms of not only enrollment, but also other components, school safety, attendance, all of those components, drawing it back to our strategic plan. If a principal comes to us and says, I can't accomplish the work around our 90-day plan, we can't accomplish what we have laid out academically for our school, we need more assistance, we're open to that conversation. As long as there's funds to pay for it, and Ms. Duke believes that there's a pool of some sort. We're having some of those conversations internally right now.
All right. 9.1.
John's making a motion.
Oh, about, you have a question about
No,
personnel?
no, not, what's 9.1?
Adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
all right. All in favor?
No, we can't go.
It's
not
I'm second, and I'll just have a child.
All right.